prepared for a ground-based confrontation. All their countermeasures and targeted plans were based on the assumption that this creature was a terrestrial being. But now, it had flown away just like that. And with the two helicopters crashing, their air force had been wiped out in an instant. They couldn't even continue the hunt for this creature, let alone catch up. They could only watch helplessly as this mutated level 5 creature flew towards the clouds. Wang Guanghua climbed onto the roof of a vehicle, shouting, "What is going on?" It flew away after putting in so much effort. The military leader also had a grim expression, but he didn't blame anyone. He knew that mutated creatures were unpredictable, and such things were impossible to foresee. He immediately issued orders to attempt tracking and report to the higher command, then wait for further instructions. However, what they didn't know was that a pitch-black cargo truck had already been closely following this level 5 mutated creature with flying abilities. That was Wang Cheng. His vehicle sped forward, and as he completely left the military's detection range in sight, he unhesitatingly switched to battleship mode. In a transformation akin to a transformer, the massive level 4 battleship rose into the air. At this moment, Wang Cheng's battleship already had the shape of an aerial platform, large and dark, soaring high above. Its speed quickly approaching Mach 1, closely tailing the giant level 5 mutated creature. It can fly? Sorry, I can fly too. Wang Cheng initially wanted to take advantage of the situation, but now it seemed he was set on capturing this level 5 creature. Main cannon ready. Target locked. The armored plate at the front of the battleship slowly rose, and the 130mm main cannon locked onto the target, firing the first round of armor-piercing ammunition directly. Not far away, the massive creature let out a piercing howl as its body plummeted, having been struck by the armor-piercing round, almost penetrated completely. This level 5 mutated creature was injured under the military's attack. It had forcefully mutated to escape, but its body strength had greatly decreased. Although its massive size still allowed it to be a dominant aerial creature, unfortunately, it was now facing Wang Cheng. The high-altitude chase did not last long. Wang Cheng's battleship closed in rapidly. The second round of the main cannon fired a high-explosive incendiary shell, hitting the left wing of the level 5 mutated creature. Amidst the blazing fire, one of its wings was nearly blown off by Wang Cheng's attack, and its huge body began to descend towards Wang Cheng's battleship. However, it was also enraged, desperately trying to claw at Wang Cheng's battleship as it fell. Unfortunately, Wang Cheng's battleship was already prepared for this moment. With a thunderous roar, 2 missiles streaked through the sky, striking their target directly. Amid the loud explosion, the level 5 mutated creature was directly killed by the city, plummeting from the sky. Within just a few minutes, the mission was accomplished. The performance, firepower, and functionality of the level 4 battleship had significantly improved compared to the previous level 3 battleship. Even facing the previously encountered mutated flying shark, the commander believed he could easily take it down. Energy points totaling 1,200 were instantly credited. The total energy points of the commander surpassed the 2,000 mark in an instant. However, he did not seem overly excited. At the same time, he received a system alert similar to the one in the coastal city, indicating the presence of an unknown high-energy creature in very close proximity. Yet his radar and visibility failed to detect any targets. Only a cloud was drifting towards him. The commander's pupils suddenly constricted. The cloud directly collided with his battleship. It was not a mere aggregation of water vapor. It had a real, physical entity. The impact caused the level 4 battleship to shake violently as a dense burst of electric snakes erupted from within that cloud, flashing along the outer insulation and armor of the ship. Warning: the external insulation layer of the battleship has suffered severe damage. Warning: the battleship's armor has been impacted by strong electromagnetic forces. Chapter 135. Who killed it? With 1,200 energy points accounted for, he was just 3,000 points short of upgrading to a level 5 battleship. The commander was indeed excited about killing the level 5 mutated creature, as he still wanted to collect the special serum from the creature before the military arrived. Special serums were quite rare among lower-level mutated creatures, only produced by certain unique ones. However, among level 5 mutated creatures, special serums were almost guaranteed. The commander was curious. The previous mutated flying shark had fire abilities that yielded a level 2 fire ability serum. What would this creature produce? Unfortunately, before he could enjoy his moment of triumph, he was suddenly attacked. The commander never expected to be assaulted by a cloud, but that was the reality. This cloud had been silently moving and had reached his side right after he finished his battle, launching a fierce attack. If this battleship were merely a contemporary fighter jet or an aerial platform, such a strong electromagnetic burst could instantly paralyze the entire ship and potentially electrocute the commander inside. Nonetheless, he felt a slight numbness in his hands gripping the controls and urgently ascended to avoid the cloud. But then he was startled, recalling his earlier encounter in the coastal city, where the sky was filled with these strange clouds. As he ascended, He hoped that this was the only problematic cloud in the area. Fortunately, it seemed that this was the only anomaly, allowing him to rise without encountering further attacks. However, the strange electromagnetic cloud below suddenly stretched into a long, thin form and shot rapidly towards the commander. A massive white cloud enveloped by terrifying electric light suddenly erupted with a spherical arc resembling a plasma ball, striking at high speed. It directly hit the left rear deck of the battleship. The ship shook violently, alarms blared incessantly, but it remained steady. This blow, which would have shattered the left wing of a Tier 3 battleship, was absorbed by the Tier 4 battleship. The battleship continued to ascend, its enormous dark form executing a 90-degree turn in the high sky, opening fire the moment it created some distance. The main cannons and missiles, already prepared, shot out, cutting through the sky with a fierce assault. They both hit the strange electromagnetic cloud. What are those things in the sky over the ocean city? Are they living creatures? Did we take them down? However, with a burst of flames and flickering electric light, the electromagnetic cloud surged forth again at high speed. Its speed was astonishing. The cloud-like body elongated in midair due to its velocity, displaying a semi-transparent, gelatinous structure with terrifying electric snakes writhing across its surface, resembling a giant electric hedgehog. Charging in once more. The battleship's crew was filled with dread as they accelerated to evade while continuing to fire. Yet, they found that their conventional weapons seemed ineffective against this entity. The missile and main cannon projectiles exploded upon impact, but did not affect its structure. And even the ship's laser cannons yielded no results. It felt as if their attacks were being absorbed. What is this thing? Why is it attacking me? Is it because I am at a high altitude? This entity seemed nothing like a mutated creature, but rather some bizarre supernatural phenomenon or an unknown human creation. Even more frightening was that the thermal radar could not detect such a theoretical high-temperature electromagnetic life form. Both thermal and ordinary radars returned blank readings, leaving the crew to rely solely on visual observation. Is this an indestructible monster? The crew was unaware as they soared through the sky, covering thousands of meters while battling the terrifying creature behind them. The entity not only ignored conventional strikes, but also launched plasma-like attacks. While the battleship could withstand 1 or 2 hits, repeated strikes would eventually lead to it sinking in the sky. The critical issue was the unpredictable situation in the sky, with multiple directions above, below, and all around. Lacking radar as their eyes diminished their combat effectiveness, they had to rely on their eyesight to track the enemy's position, which was extremely challenging in the high-speed aerial battle. The entity was incredibly agile, closely tailing the battleship, continuously attacking, seizing opportunities, and even attempting to crash into it. The crew felt as if it wanted to swallow the entire battleship in a way they could not comprehend. This strange cloud was not just in the ocean city. It also appeared over the capital. What exactly are they? The crew made multiple attempts to counterattack, all ending in failure. A cold sweat trickled down their foreheads. He felt an unprecedented threat of death. He had a sense that this cloud was constantly attacking, blocking his path forward, seemingly with some purpose, deliberately driving the battleship of his kingdom toward a certain location. It was intelligent. Without a doubt, that location must be extremely dangerous, an absolute place of slaughter. Moreover, there were countless of its kind. The kingdom had seen the vast layers of clouds in the coastal city's sky, and if this cloud also came from there, then other clouds might have drifted over as well. Stay calm. Is there any way to destroy it? Conventional weapons were ineffective. Energy weapons were ineffective. The current weapon systems of the battleship were all ineffective. So what weapons do I have left? Suddenly, the heart of the kingdom jumped. He operated the battleship with one hand, diving to evade, while with the other hand he rummaged through the storage unit of the battleship and quickly found a metal sphere the size of a walnut. It was a superconducting electromagnetic bomb he had obtained from a box. Manually activated, when thrown, it could paralyze electronic devices within a radius of 1 kilometer for up to 15 minutes. If this thing had some kind of electromagnetic generation capability, then it might be useful. Taking a deep breath, he felt more and more that this thing might be useful, but he only had one superconducting electromagnetic bomb. Only one chance. He didn't dare to be reckless, slowing down to let the cloud monster close in. It seemed unaware of the danger. At that moment, the kingdom urgently stopped the battleship high in the sky, briefly opened the hatch, relying on the powerful strength of the awakened to stabilize his body, and manually activated and directly threw out the superconducting electromagnetic pulse bomb amidst the terrifying winds at high altitude. At that moment, the cloud creature was preparing another plasma projectile, about to launch. If the kingdom failed this time, he would face that plasma bomb with his flesh and blood. However, an invisible shock swept through. The superconducting electromagnetic pulse bomb exploded in the sky, and the terrifying strong electromagnetic interference swept across the sky. Before the kingdom's eyes, the cloud suddenly lost its luster like a short circuit, revealing a structure resembling some kind of transistor, and then it exploded inch by inch in the sky. It was not a living being being killed. It was more like some kind of technological device exploding. Finally, he managed to destroy that thing. The kingdom was still somewhat shaken. He could not understand what that thing was, where it came from, what its purpose was, and why it attacked him. But these questions had no answers. System notification, 300 energy points credited. The kingdom's energy points reached 2,300. But this strange thing was only worth 300 energy points. However, the kingdom had no time to think about it, as the electromagnetic pulse bomb swept through, causing all systems of the battleship to go offline, and the entire ship instantly turned into a massive iron shell, losing all functions and plummeting from the sky. Fortunately, the city had been well prepared. After staying at a high altitude for a while, it urgently returned to the cockpit and restarted the battleship. The ship, which was in a steep dive, suddenly pulled up less than 200 meters from the ground, soaring back into the sky. Despite its scars, it was still the victor. Meanwhile, unbeknownst to the city, military personnel and the awakened team were in hot pursuit and had just discovered the corpse of the giant fifth-level creature, which had recently mutated from a mutated squirrel. At this moment, it had been 7 or 8 minutes since the city had slain it, and blood was flowing everywhere. The body in a tragic state. The military leader and the awakened team were utterly shocked by the scene before them. The military leader dispatched someone to investigate and found that it seemed to have been killed by some kind of hot weapon, which made it even harder to believe. How could this be possible? We are here acting, and there are no other brother units around. And who could possibly kill a fifth-level mutated creature so quickly? Chapter 136. You were already dead. The terrifying monster that had just taken flight was now lying dead in the wilderness, astonishing everyone. Wang Guanghua rushed out from the awakened team's vehicle to take a look and was horrified by the terrifying wounds and clear signs of being blown apart on the fifth-level mutated creature's corpse. He exclaimed, "What on earth happened? Who is this powerful?" His tone was filled with shock and barely concealed jealousy. After all, they had surrounded and forced this fifth-level mutated creature into a corner. So who had stolen their glory? This question puzzled everyone. The military leader had been making satellite calls since the beginning, seemingly trying to contact nearby units and higher command, but the answers he received only deepened his frown. He had confirmed that there were no other brother units around, and higher command had not anticipated that this mutated creature would turn into a flying monster, nor had they made any prior arrangements. So, who was it that, under these circumstances, just happened to be here and took down this fifth-level monster before vanishing? No one knew. Before the apocalypse, even in this remote field, the tightly monitored system would have been able to reconstruct what had happened here. But now, no one could predict the creature's movements, making it impossible to track its position or determine what had killed it. The awakened team and the military personnel exchanged glances. They were proud, yet at this moment, they were utterly astonished. Who had killed this monster was surprising, but the implications of it were even more unfathomable. To eliminate a flying fifth-level creature in such a short time and then leave without a trace. What kind of person or force could achieve that? How powerful could they be? What was their goal? It was possible that this individual was not even affiliated with the military. Meanwhile, at the command center, the unexpected situation was rapidly relayed to Yi Anshan's desk. As the deputy commander of the area, he may not be the true highest authority at the survivor base, but he is certainly the one handling various matters. Of course, hunting a level 5 mutated creature didn't draw much of his attention, as it wasn't as significant compared to the previous operation at the granary. However, due to the sudden situation, relevant information and intelligence were promptly sent to him. He took a glance at the reports, took a deep breath, and handed the documents to his waiting secretary, instructing, "Compare this data with the scars on the corpse of the mutated giant shark from the last granary incident." His secretary, who was aware of the previous incident, responded in surprise, "Are you suspecting that this was done by the same person as the last granary incident?" "I'm not sure," he replied. "I only know that no ordinary survivor could achieve this level of capability other than us. We must find out who he is, and whether he is friend or foe to us. Go quickly." "I understand." The secretary, who also had a military background and held a high rank, recognized the seriousness of the situation and left immediately with the documents. Meanwhile, the convoy from the research center was slowly approaching the scene. A black van followed closely behind. As researchers, they would only come closer once safety was ensured. The corpse of this level 5 mutated creature was difficult to transport back to the current survivor base. So the research center team planned to conduct cutting and sampling on-site to collect important experimental samples. Their convoy gradually neared. Although the military and the awakened team couldn't ascertain who had killed the monster, they continued with their unfinished tasks, coordinating with the research center. They had already set up a perimeter to defend while giving the research center staff enough time to gather samples. The researchers instantly became busy. At the same time, one of the awakened team members, Wang Chung, stealthily jumped out of the vehicle and moved closer to the giant creature. Although the size of this level 5 monster didn't seem as exaggerated compared to the upgraded level 4 battleship, it was still massive compared to a human. Wang Chung found a corner, preparing to approach quietly. He hadn't extracted the special serum from this monster yet. The special serum was rare and allowed a person to inject multiple serums to gain various abilities. This level 5 monster possessed unique abilities, and Wang Chung didn't want to miss out on the special serum it had. So, he decided to sneak over with the researchers to examine the corpse. However, as he got closer, he was spotted. Wang Guanghua from the Awakened team stood atop the level 5 monster's corpse, looking down at Wang Chung and said, "Oh, I thought it was someone important, but it's just our precious second-level Awakened one, Mr. Wang. What are you doing here? Haven't you seen a level 5 mutated creature before? Seeing you like this, it's as if you've stumbled upon something new and interesting. If I didn't know you, I might mistake you for one of those scavengers from survivor bases looking to pilfer monster corpses." Within the survivor base, there are indeed a series of emerging industries in this post-apocalyptic world, such as those who trade in monster corpses as collectibles. Naturally, the buyers are mostly influential figures within the survivor base, while ordinary survivors can't afford such high-end items. When Wang Guanghua made this remark, he showed no restraint and spoke loudly, drawing the attention of many, especially the awakened members of the teams, who looked at Wang Chung with disdain. One particularly blunt individual muttered under his breath, "Heh, when it comes to fighting monsters, he keeps his distance, but now he sees a monster corpse and rushes over. What a coward." In the corner, another level 2 awakened individual, Zheng Hailong, was also watching, and though he didn't say anything, his gaze towards Wang Chung was far from friendly. Zhang Chao, with his explosive temperament, was about to lose his cool, but fortunately, Su Xinghai stopped him. Wang Chung, however, didn't care. He simply smiled lightly, stroking the body of the level 5 mutated creature, unbothered, and said, "To be honest, I've never seen a level 5 mutated creature's corpse before. Isn't this just a chance to observe?" These people couldn't have imagined that this level 5 monster was actually slain by Wang Chung himself, the very one who swiftly eliminated the powerful creature. However, Wang Chung had no intention of arguing about it. Discussing it would only bring him trouble. It was better to maintain a tacit understanding, which would make Wang Guanghua and the others lose interest and shift their focus elsewhere. Sure enough, with Wang Chung showing no aggressive attitude, Wang Guanghua lost interest, snorted coldly, and said, "You must be hiding well in the research center. Don't come out and get scared to death by a monster." With that, he turned to leave, continuing his patrol with his fellow awakened warriors, discussing who had quietly taken down the level 5 monster. As they departed, Wang Chung placed his hand on the body of the mutated giant and extracted a special serum. Extraction successful. A bone-like syringe appeared in Wang Chung's hand. Type 1 plant special serum. Wang Chung narrowed his eyes. This was indeed a brand new type of special serum. However, the term plant made him somewhat suspicious. Surely it wouldn't cause someone to grow plants, right? But then, Wang Chung suddenly recalled the ability that Su Ling had demonstrated before. A faint green glow. He had later asked Su Ling about it, and she mentioned that her ability was special, capable of masking her own presence and healing others, which was quite gentle. Perhaps this was a category of Su Ling's ability? This wasn't the place for contemplation. Wang Chung discreetly stowed it away. His series of actions went unnoticed by anyone. However, their progress was not smooth. The research center is diligently collecting the remains of a level 5 mutated creature. Not far away, several armed helicopters have flown in and approached closely. Upon inquiry, it was revealed that they had received orders from the military to assist in hunting the level 5 mutated creature that had developed the ability to fly. But they arrived too late and found that the battle had already ended. Prior to this, the mission of these helicopters was to track a massive hot air balloon that appeared outside the survivor base. This was the same object that Wang Chung and his group had seen before the hunt for the level 5 mutated creature began. Although the survivor base has always been surrounded by monsters, the military has never ceased monitoring and acting in the surrounding areas, being fully aware of any abnormal situations and taking targeted measures immediately. That strange hot air balloon had been discovered early on, prompting another team to investigate. The armed helicopters did indeed make a discovery. They found a living person on the balloon. When Wang Chung and the others approached and saw the person brought back from the hot air balloon by the military, they were all taken aback. It was Qin Hai from the Awakener team of Haiqing. How did he end up here? However, upon seeing Qin Hai again, he looked terrifying, appearing deranged and disheveled, sitting on the ground like a madman. And when experts from the military and the research center examined him, he only cowered in fear. But when Wang Chung and his group appeared, he recognized them at once. Qin Hai suddenly screamed in terror, pointing at Wang Chung. "What are you doing here? How can you still be alive? I saw it with my own eyes. I saw it. You were killed by a monster." Chapter 137. Has the city of Fengtian fallen? Qin Hai's scream drew everyone's attention to Wang Chung and the other two. Wang Cheng and his companions felt a chill run down their spines, confused and unsure of what was happening. Wang Guanghua asked, "Do you know him? Is he related to you?" Wang Cheng certainly recognized Qin Hai. Seeing him in such a state shocked and worried him about the condition of Captain Zhang and the others. The last time he saw Qin Hai was during the Great Escape from Fengtian. For a while, Zhang Chao and Su Xinghai had been acting together with Qin Hai and Zhang Rui's team, and ultimately, Zhang Chao and Su Xinghai had turned back to help Wang Cheng, while Qin Hai escaped with Zhang Rui's team. After that, they had not seen Qin Hai again. Their relationship with him was never good. He was a petty person, and Wang Cheng had no interest in his situation. However, given the circumstances at that time, Qin Hai should have retreated with Zhang Rui's team and joined the fleeing military forces. So many days had passed. He should have been with Zhang Rui and the others. Why was he here, sitting alone on a strange hot air balloon, acting crazily until the military found him? Did something happen to Zhang Rui and his team? A multitude of doubts surged in Wang Cheng's heart, accompanied by an unsettling chill. It felt as if a cold wave spread from his spine, and the astonished gazes of those around him, along with Qin Hai's frantic shouts, became less distinct. The military leaders responsible for this operation, as well as the action team leader on the armed helicopter tasked with addressing the balloon incident, all turned to Wang Cheng. "What on earth is going on? You know him. What is really happening?" "We asked him many questions along the way, but we still don't even know his name. He has shown almost no reaction to the outside world. Why is he reacting so strongly to you? Who exactly are you?" Clearly, this situation required an explanation from Wang Cheng. Moreover, the two military leaders immediately became extremely wary of him. The military leader who had been involved in hunting the level 5 monsters was still relatively composed, but the action team leader responsible for the balloon incident had even placed a hand on the holster of his sidearm, appearing ready to draw his weapon at any moment. If Wang Cheng's response was inadequate, they might even open fire on the spot. Wang Guanghua, Zheng Hailong, and others all took a step back. They weren't fond of Wang Cheng and his group, and at this moment, they certainly wouldn't approach, fearing trouble. Wang Guanghua wore a look of schadenfreude. He had no grievances against Wang Cheng, but he was envious that Wang Cheng and his team had entered the research center that he had previously been unable to access, and he hoped to see them get into trouble. "Excuse me, gentlemen, but this is a key experimental project subject of our research center. If you want to do anything to him, shouldn't you first ask for our opinion?" At this moment, the head of the research center stepped forward, standing in front of Wang Cheng and directly addressing the military personnel. The importance of the research center to the survivor base in Fengtian was self-evident, and they still had to give some face. The expressions of the military personnel darkened slightly, but after a moment, they eased the tension and said, "We apologize. We were hasty. However, this matter is serious, and we need to send 2 soldiers in your vehicle to prevent any issues. Is that acceptable?" This was something the research center personnel could not refuse. Wang Cheng and the others had no objections either. Wang Cheng's gaze fell only on Qin Hai. Qin Hai appeared deranged. The former pride and confidence of being the top figure in the Haiqing Awakened team were completely gone, leaving only madness and dazedness. He pointed at Wang Cheng and the others, repeatedly muttering strange words, his eyes wide as if he had seen a ghost, and only quieted down once he was taken back to the helicopter. What had happened to Qin Hai? He had completely changed. Wang Cheng had many questions he wanted to ask, but he knew it wasn't the right time. Qin Hai's outburst had made them the targets of everyone's attention. If he were to ask questions now, it would only invite trouble. Wang Cheng and Su Xinghai exchanged a glance, both recognizing the deep worry in each other's eyes. But they needed to clarify this matter. "I'm afraid this needs to be considered carefully." Wang Cheng had more thoughts on the matter. He suddenly realized that, on the way from High City, the survivors he encountered, those who went mad and those who died, along with the military evacuation teams from the High City area, had all faced strange issues. Looking back now, the journey from High City was filled with immense horror. At that time, Wang Cheng thought the hasty retreat of the temporary survivor base in High City was due to the earlier discovery of the rapidly growing crimson potted monster at the university's location, which could endanger the entire city. However, upon reflection, it seemed this situation was far more complicated. The frantic and desperate escape, even disregarding the large group behind them after encountering danger, suggested that during the major withdrawal, they had reached a state of panic. This was not simple at all. The mass exodus from High City might have had even more terrifying underlying reasons. Perhaps that reason was the source of a series of bizarre occurrences that followed. The large retreating force had mysteriously vanished, while those who were left behind managed to survive, but those who stayed in the High City area, like Qin Hai, ultimately lost their sanity. With Qin Hai in such a state, the situation of Zhang Rui's unit was likely not any better. Moreover, reflecting on today, the strange cloud creature Wang Cheng encountered seemed to defy classification as just a mutated organism. Outside the survivor base in Fengtian, the sky was bright. Yet a layer of gloom hung over Wang Cheng's heart. an unsettling feeling that sent chills through him. The series of events had made the atmosphere among the entire team tense. Everyone's movements quickened, while Wang Cheng and his companions were silently watched by two soldiers. There was nothing they could do but wait. Fortunately, the research center's operation to deal with that level 5 mutated organism didn't take long, and their convoy began its return journey. Armed helicopters also took off at that moment, having waited to return alongside the ground operations team. The sky was gradually darkening, with patches of clouds swirling above. Wang Cheng returned to his vehicle. Initially, he had expected to gain a lot from this outing, but the events that unfolded left him feeling uneasy and worried. On their vehicle, two young soldiers remained diligently committed to their duties. Wang Cheng found it hard to communicate with Su Xinghai and others, deciding to wait until they returned to Feng Tian to discuss things. However, he did not forget to express his gratitude to the research center's head for their assistance. The sky darkened further, with the sun's rays obscured by thick clouds, creating an ominous atmosphere. The return journey was uneventful. The military was well prepared and ready to open the city gates for Wang Cheng and his team once more. However, as their convoy slowly approached, something unusual happened ahead. Suddenly, a series of thunderous explosions echoed in the sky, and the already dim atmosphere brightened with arcs of blue lightning. Everyone looked up in shock to see a mass of clouds mingled with heavy layers suddenly becoming eerie, crackling with electromagnetic energy. Moments later, it transformed into a piercing flash of lightning that plummeted from the sky, crashing down onto the outer city wall of the survivor base, causing a thunderous explosion. In an instant, sparks flew everywhere, and the deafening sound of the blast shook the ground. No one had anticipated this sudden turn of events, nor could they make any defensive preparations in advance. In the blink of an eye, a terrifying breach was blasted into the defense line of the survivor base, with many soldiers on top either affected by the explosion or killed instantly by the electric shock. The half of the defensive line in that area was instantly rendered ineffective. Countless monsters let out earth-shattering howls, and the distant ant hills trembled like mountains, surging toward the breach like sharks smelling blood. The survivor base was suddenly in a precarious situation. Chapter 138. Top Experts. It was a magnificent yet tragic scene. Countless monsters surged forward, a mass of grotesque mutated creatures rushing toward the breach in the survivor base, forming a black tide in an instant. The recent bizarre explosion had caused the defense line in that area to collapse, creating a brief opening. Only the flanking troops of the survivor base were firing, while the core position was almost silent, watching helplessly as a mutated bison, as large as a small hill, trampled the iron fence, further widening the makeshift wall behind it and causing even greater destruction. The recent explosion had carried terrifying electrical energy, nearly paralyzing the electrical grid system on half of the area's fences. Otherwise, this mutated bison would have been scorched before it dared to trample him like that. On the ground, countless mutated beings with split heads roared forward, while towering advanced mutated creatures moved between them, trampling many human mutants to death, leaving behind a ground of mangled flesh. Moreover, the ant and bee swarms at the edge of the battlefield began to move. Their massive fortress-like nests slowly advanced, resembling ancient construction vehicles, with countless giant ants crawling in and out. Some had evolved into bizarre forms, still resembling ants in appearance, but with bodies that were half pink and half oil green, and thin, gossamer wings growing from their backs, capable of low-altitude flight for short distances. In the front, just one distant glance revealed a terrifying horde of monsters pouring in, with countless creatures roaring and screaming as they charged into the survivor base. In that direction, sporadic gunfire could be heard, but soon, two fighter jets soared into the sky from the survivor base, using the airport's electromagnetic catapult system. They flew at high speed, dropping bombs to strike the horde of mutated creatures below. Troops in other locations are also being urgently reassigned to fill the gaps. The situation is extremely urgent. Everyone knows that if this position is breached, it would create a gap in the survivor base, putting the hundreds of thousands of survivors inside at great risk. The newly established survivor base could face immediate danger. Losing one area could lead to the collapse of the entire territory. In fact, the command center of the survivor base has already initiated emergency operations. Yi Anshan arrived at the operations room promptly to coordinate efforts. This middle-aged general furrowed his brow, his gaze fixed on the images on the screen. He understood that the first wave of mutated creatures pouring in was only a show of force. The real threat was the terrifying giant ant nest moving among the monster horde, along with several level 5 mutated creatures approaching from this direction. One of them, a mutated turtle, was now colossal, comparable in size to a large shopping center, with a shell that had also grown to an enormous scale, covered in dense spikes, showing signs of cannon fire and bullet marks. Its movement was slow, but its defensive and destructive capabilities were astonishing. The military had previously attempted to strike it with armor-piercing rounds, but even that couldn't penetrate its shell. Once it reached the front of the gap, its impact would be monumental. At this moment, an officer spoke up. Deputy Commander Yi, should we open fire? Bomb the gap? There are too many monsters right now. Our emergency troops and surrounding forces have all been deployed, but there is still no quick way to seal the gap in a short time. If this continues, the officer's voice trailed off, anxiety etched on his face. If they couldn't seal the gap, more terrifying creatures would swarm in, leading to a total collapse of the frontline defense. We cannot bomb, Yi Anshan replied decisively. Bombing would further damage the outer defense system of our survivor base. Our soldiers need time. We must buy time. We should target the ant nests and level 5 mutated creatures in the rear. Additionally, recall all nearby external forces to the perimeter to attract the attention of these monsters and relieve pressure on the defense line. We must buy time, and then... Yi Anshan paused slightly, gazing at the tranquil sky in stark contrast to the tense firefight below, and slowly said, immediately contact the research center and our military experts. I need to know what that thing in the sky is. Yi Anshan's expression was grave. To him, while the frontline battlefield was indeed urgent, what truly unsettled him was the appearance of the breach in the outer defense line of the survivor base. This was clearly not a coincidence. Nor was it simply a weather phenomenon, like a lightning strike. It was something more sinister. The Joint Command Center was urgently coordinating, with countless personnel busy supporting the frontline battlefield. Meanwhile, outside the survivor base, the group, led by Wang Qing, quickly received the deployment order from the survivor base. Seeing the changes happening at the base, they refrained from advancing carelessly, fearing to disturb the crazed horde of monsters. Instead, they hid on the outskirts, waiting for orders until this moment. The military leader of the action team stated, the situation is urgent, and our mission has changed. The personnel from the research center will stay here, and we need to cooperate with the 3rd Armored Regiment, which is also operating outside the city, to launch a joint attack on the mutated ant nest at position 7. We must take it down or divert it. The military leader raised his hand and pointed to a large ant nest not far ahead. Giant ants and wasps were coming and going, making it hard to believe that these two species could share the same nest. After saying this, the military leader paused and glanced at Wang Cheng, saying, everyone, all forces are to engage. We need all available strength. The situation had clearly changed under these circumstances. Even the precious researchers from the research center would be left behind without anyone to protect them, let alone Wang Cheng and the others. Naturally, they all had to join the fight. Wang Cheng was momentarily taken aback before regaining his composure. Wang Guanghua sneered and mocked, what's wrong? Are you stunned? Didn't he see this coming, huh? Even if you've infiltrated the research center, so what? You still have to go to the battlefield. Be careful not to scare yourself too much, haha. Wang Cheng didn't even glance at him, silently looking into the distance. He had indeed been distracted. But it wasn't due to fear. Rather, it was the terrifying cloud strike he had just witnessed. That strange electromagnetic cloud, if he wasn't mistaken, was definitely the same one he had seen in Haicheng, just clashing in the sky. However, the more he thought about it, the more chilling it became, filling him with immense unease. It was one thing for the electromagnetic cloud to chase him, but now, the obvious impact against the outer wall of the survivor base was a conscious and intelligent act. It aimed to breach the city walls and let the monsters outside in, with the goal of destroying the survivor base. Were there clouds in the sky that could do this? What exactly were they? Where did they come from? Why were they doing this? Wang Cheng didn't know, and at the moment, it seemed no one could provide answers to his questions. With the military leader's command, Wang Cheng and his team were to begin their actions immediately. On the battlefield, the situation was changing rapidly, and every second counted. Receiving the order meant that any delay could jeopardize the entire operation and lead to a complete collapse of the battlefield. Their team's task was to assist the 3rd Armored Regiment in launching the attack. The 3rd Armored Regiment was not stationed within the survivor base, but had been operating outside, helping the command and research center while also rescuing some survivors. Therefore, they were urgently mobilized to launch an attack at this critical moment. The ant nest at position 7 is the largest and closest to the breach of the survivor base in Fengtian. Blocking its advance and preventing this ant nest from penetrating the breach to enter Fengtian will play a crucial role in the entire battle situation. On the front line, the 3rd Armored Division has already moved to the designated position, launching an attack with tank clusters. Heavy artillery tears through the monster horde, and missiles streak across the sky, striking the massive mutated ant nest at position 7 with thunderous impacts. Amidst the loud explosions, dirt flies everywhere, and the layered structure of the mutated ant nest is blasted open. However, this action seems to have stirred a hornet's nest, as swarms of winged, pale green ants and giant hornets surge forth, rushing towards them in droves. Moreover, as the front of the ant nest is blown open, an even more terrifying scene is revealed below. Within a structure resembling a beehive, The massive ant nest is supported not only by soil and rocks, but also by a strange transparent substance secreted by the mutated ants. This substance is as hard as steel, forming the entire framework of the ant nest, remaining stable even amidst heavy artillery and missiles. More frighteningly, inside these beehive-like structures, countless terrifying mutated ants are densely packed, making it seem as if the gigantic mutated ant nest, akin to a small mountain, is crawling with mutated creatures, the number of which is dozens of times what it appears from the outside. On this giant ant mound, there are at least thousands of mutated ants. They roar and charge out, instantly engaging the military in a firefight. At the same time, Wang Chung and their action team have also entered the battlefield, coordinating from another direction to engage with the mutated monsters. Surrounding them are not only mutated ants and giant hornets, but also a large number of ordinary mutated beings mixed with high-level special mutated creatures, howling, crawling, twisting, and struggling as they launch attacks against them. In the air, a mutated hornet roars towards them, while on the military's off-road vehicle, soldiers operate heavy machine guns, unleashing a barrage of bullets that quickly tear apart the abdomen of the giant mutated hornet. However, even in its dying moments, it still launches its stinger, which travels faster than a bullet, striking a soldier and sending him flying off the vehicle, impaled on the ground below. The second soldier immediately takes his place, roaring as he opens fire. Meanwhile, the Awakener team is continuously shrinking in number. They are not regular troops, and in such chaotic battlefield conditions, they feel the terrifying threat of death, gradually growing cold with fear. The true battlefield is not the vivid scenes portrayed in films. For those on the battlefield, they can only see a corner of it, completely unaware of what is happening further away. Moreover, to survive, they must keep their attention focused on what is right in front of them. Otherwise, they risk their lives, which makes it easier for fear to take root in them, especially when they see enemies all around. What should we do now? This is not about buying time or attracting monsters. This is seeking death. This is truly seeking death. Wang Guanghua's face showed fear as he constantly looked at Zheng Hailong beside him. The military's advance was sinking into a quagmire. Ahead, the 3rd Armored Regiment was facing unprecedented resistance after moving a short distance, encountering a frenzied attack from mutated ants. These mutated ants were numerous, and their hardened shells were resistant to regular bullets, making it difficult to inflict effective damage. They surged out in groups, howling wildly, entangled with the military forces. Once the advance was hindered, monsters from all directions rushed in, encircling the entire regiment tightly. If the military was struggling, the smaller team from Wangcheng was even more disadvantaged in terms of numbers and firepower, and they too found themselves trapped, stuck in a quagmire with no way to advance or retreat. The military soldiers were somewhat better off, but most of the awakened team members were ordinary people. As they saw the situation change, their morale began to waver. Wang Guanghua, who had just been mocking Wangcheng, was the first to tremble, wishing he could sprout wings to escape. Zheng Hailong's eyes flickered, but he gritted his teeth and said, "Stop. We cannot be afraid. If we are afraid, our line will truly be finished. We are useful. Look, we have held back the advance of this ant nest, relieving the pressure on the gap at the Feng Tian survivor base. My wife and children are in the Feng Tian survivor base. Don't be scared. Look, even Wangcheng isn't afraid." Wang Guanghua's teeth were chattering. When he turned his head, he saw Wangcheng and the other two forming a triangle against the monster's onslaught, showing no signs of fear as they continued to fight back, and it seemed they actually had some strength. Witnessing this, Wang Guanghua felt an indescribable sensation in his heart, almost gritting his teeth in frustration. Meanwhile, Wangcheng kept gazing at the ant nest. His small truck was steady in the line, but he understood that this situation couldn't continue. These mutated ants were not ordinary mutated creatures. They had a strong sense of collective awareness. The 3rd Armored Regiment was clearly aware of this as well. To draw their attention, they fired directly at the nest, which only made the mutated ants go completely berserk, rushing out to defend their nest regardless of the cost. In this situation, the solution was not to retreat or flee. These mutated ants were as formidable as infantry fighting vehicles. If they tried to run, it would lead to a chaotic rout with heavy losses. The only way was to advance and seize the ant nest, causing the mutated ants to panic and collapse. The military seemed to be trying, launching missiles repeatedly, but unfortunately, the mutated ants had a strong instinct to defend their nest, sacrificing their lives to block missile and heavy fire attacks, making it nearly impossible to shake the ant nest. Given the current situation, Wangcheng realized that if he wanted to take the ant nest by himself, he would need to activate the warship. However, in front of so many people, he was reluctant to do so, but as the situation worsened, he began to hesitate. However, at this moment, new orders came from the front. Responding to the request for cooperation from the 3rd Armored Regiment, they organized a daring team to break through the monster formation. Ahead, the 3rd Armored Regiment sprang into action, charging forward wildly. more news arrived that they had prepared 2 white phosphorus missiles, intending to get close enough to detonate them, even within the nest, turning the entire ant colony to ashes. Hearing this plan, Wang Cheng's eyes lit up. He believed it was feasible. The mutated ant nest was supported by some strange adhesive, making it structurally strong and hard to destroy. However, that adhesive was clearly some kind of organic substance secreted by a living organism. With the burning capability and temperature of white phosphorus munitions, it was more than enough to ignite the entire nest. Consequently, their team advanced with the 3rd Armored Regiment, attempting to help divert the attention of the monster swarm. But the mutated ants seemed to have noticed the intentions of the 3rd Armored Regiment, crazily blocking their advance. Regardless of Wang Cheng and his team, they were forced to detonate one of the white phosphorus missiles along the way, flames erupting wildly. Yet, the mutated ants surged forward as if mad. Even while on fire, they still launched attacks against the humans. The human army was fearless, but these mutated creatures were equally reckless, unafraid of death. However, at that moment, Wang Cheng saw a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. The dense swarm of monsters was drawn to the 3rd Armored Regiment, and groups of mutated ants gathered frantically over there. In their direction, a huge gap appeared. Although they did not have white phosphorus missiles, Wang Cheng possessed explosive fire abilities. After testing with Professor Chen these days, he was well aware of his flame temperature, control, and volume, all far exceeding those of typical fire ability awakeners. He was confident he could ignite the ant nest. Without hesitation, Wang Cheng took action. He floored the accelerator, speeding out from the convoy and charging ahead. The military leaders were stunned. What was he doing? Did he not realize that recklessly charging out would disrupt their formation and lead to a complete collapse? Wang Guanghua shouted, "Look, look! This Wang Cheng is panicking and has lost his way. He wants to run. He's the real coward." Zheng Hailong was also surprised, not expecting Wang Cheng to take such a bold move. But looking at the direction Wang Cheng was driving, he thought, wait, that direction is wrong. He intends to go to the mutated ant nest? The military leaders also realized that Wang Cheng might be trying to seize the opportunity to attack the nest. But how could that be possible? Although many mutated ants were drawn away by the 3rd Armored Regiment, reducing their pressure, there was still a congestion of monsters ahead, and they did not have powerful enough incendiary weapons. Under such circumstances, even armored vehicles might struggle to push through. A civilian truck like Wang Cheng's, no matter its weight, could not possibly make it through, and even if he did, it would be useless. It was clear that someone from the research center had never been on the battlefield and was too idealistic. In this moment, many people had the thought that Wang Cheng was doomed. In such a situation, charging at the monsters with a car was nothing short of suicidal, right? However, just as this thought arose, he witnessed an unbelievable scene. The civilian truck driven by Wang Cheng was charging forward like a tank, fiercely colliding with the mutated creatures along the way, which were being knocked aside as he barreled through. The stability of his vehicle was as solid as a mountain. Speeding ahead. What a joke. Wang Cheng was like a steel warship when colliding with these low-level mutated creatures, as long as he picked up speed. Who could withstand his charge? The 2 young warriors inside Wang Cheng's vehicle were left in shock, unable to react, and could only watch as he surged forward. Thus, amidst the disbelief and astonished expressions of the crowd, Wang Cheng drove his dark truck, kicking up dust, directly to the bottom of the mutated ant nest, briefly disappearing from view. Then, suddenly, the mutated ant nest erupted in flames, shooting up into the sky. In an instant, it turned into a massive burning torch. Countless mutated ants screamed in frenzy, all retreating, as the line of mutated ants that had just been held back collapsed in an instant. The 3rd Armored Division, mired in confusion, wondered, our death squad hasn't even arrived yet? Who triggered the explosion at the mutated ant nest? In Wang Cheng's team, the military leader was initially dumbfounded, then incredulous. Even if Wang Cheng could reach beneath the ant nest, how could he possibly have the capability to ignite the entire nest? Finally, he recalled the information he had seen about Wang Cheng, remembering that this individual had a secondary fire ability. But could a secondary fire ability user accomplish such a feat? The military leaders suddenly realized that their previous judgment of Wang Cheng had been wrong. Although he was from the research center, he was likely not just a turtle hiding away, but a top-tier expert. Chapter 139, Famous in One Battle. Dear host, you have successfully hunted and obtained energy points. Dear host, you have successfully hunted and obtained energy points. You have obtained energy points. The dense system notification sounds rang in Wang Cheng's ears. His dim truck was reversing from directly beneath the massive ant nest, which was now engulfed in flames. The fire ability from the mutated giant birds was well suited for demolition. Just a moment ago, Wang Cheng had charged into the base of the huge ant nest using high speed, and then opened the car door to unleash a torrent of flames. Worried that his fire might not be sufficient, Wang Cheng upgraded 2 incendiary grenades on the spot and threw them out. As a secondary awakened individual, Wang Cheng's fire ability was enhanced, allowing him to release a much greater volume of flames than before. The situation of the mutated ant nest was exactly as Wang Cheng had anticipated. It was primarily composed of flammable materials. Conventional strikes might not ignite it. But Wang Cheng's direct approach of driving into the nest and setting it ablaze proved successful. Of course, the key was that Wang Cheng's firepower was sufficient. Otherwise, igniting such a massive structure would not be as easy as it appeared. Moreover, it seems that not all of these mutated ants possess intelligence. Although they have undergone significant mutations, their biological patterns still resemble those of ordinary ants. Amidst the flames, Wang Cheng saw a giant queen ant struggling and writhing in the collapsed ant nest, howling incessantly as it gradually succumbed to the fire. Its collapse directly plunged the previously well-structured mutated ant swarm into a state of semi-collapse, significantly reducing the pressure on the military. In the vehicle with Wang Cheng, Zhang Chao and Su Xinghai had long grown accustomed to his series of maneuvers. However, the two young soldiers who were previously instructed to watch over Wang Cheng and his companions were now completely dumbfounded. Initially, they had some wariness towards Wang Cheng and the others, but at this moment, as they turned their gaze towards them, a hint of respect emerged in their eyes. Wang Cheng's actions displayed undeniable bravery and strength in their view. A vehicle charged in, igniting the entire giant mutated ant nest, a feat not everyone would have the courage or capability to accomplish. Yet, Wang Cheng did it effortlessly. His approach was straightforward and forceful, crashing through all the monsters along the way and detonating the ant nest. The flames soared into the sky. The massive mutated ant nest, reminiscent of a fortress, transformed into a blazing torch, while the mutated ants, seemingly oblivious to fear, surged forward through the flames, attempting to extinguish the fire. But this was merely a path to their demise, as they all perished in the inferno, contributing to Wang Cheng's energy points. From the very beginning, Wang Cheng's system notifications had not ceased. His energy points skyrocketed like a rocket. In just a short moment, they had reached nearly 3,000. A giant mutated ant, depending on its size, was worth between 2 to 5 energy points. Although half of the mutated ants had already fled the nest, there were still plenty left. Under such scorching conditions, a significant number of them directly added to Wang Cheng's tally, causing his energy points to surge dramatically. When Wang Cheng took action, he only hoped to break the deadlock. He did not want to see the military personnel sacrificing themselves in vain here. Nor did he anticipate that these rising energy points would turn out to be an unexpected gain. Even Wang Cheng was pleasantly surprised, his gaze involuntarily drifting towards another giant ant nest in the distance. However, that location was too far away. Their previous position was relatively close to the mutated ant nest, allowing Wang Cheng to drive his small truck and crash through with the powerful momentum of the warship and alloy armor. But if the distance was too great, he wouldn't be able to replicate the earlier scene. Therefore, he could only temporarily abandon that idea. Nevertheless, he optimistically estimated that he would likely reach the threshold of 4,000 energy points today. Upgrading to a level 5 warship was now within reach. At this moment, with the collapse of the mutated ant swarm, the military was regaining control of the battlefield. The troops of the 3rd Armored Regiment surged forward, cutting through the monstrous horde, unleashing an array of advanced weaponry that bombarded the burning mutated ant nest and the surrounding creatures. Wang Cheng watched, feeling a pang of regret. I've already set it ablaze. Why keep shooting? Just let it burn for a while. The system's judgment mechanism was quite rigorous. Only high-energy beings killed by Wang Cheng could absorb energy points. For instance, the mutated ants burned by Wang Cheng would still yield energy points, but if any of the creatures being burned were killed by military personnel, those energy points would be lost. However, at this moment, Wang Cheng couldn't let the military cease fire. Moreover, it wasn't just the 3rd Armored Regiment approaching. Wang Cheng's own group of warriors was also gathering around. Yet, everyone's expressions toward Wang Cheng were particularly complex, especially the awakened team members like Wang Guanghua, who were now wearing looks of disbelief and astonishment. They could never have imagined that the usually reclusive Wang Cheng, who had been hiding behind them, possessed such strength to carve out a bloody path, ignite the mutated ant nest, and seize a critical point on the battlefield, bringing a clear turning point to the situation. As the surroundings gradually became safer, the military took control of the situation. The military leader in charge of the team even jumped out of the vehicle and approached Wang Cheng directly, saying, "I apologize for my previous actions. You have reversed the entire situation. If it weren't for your intervention, we would have had to pay a greater price to take down this giant ant nest. You truly are an exceptional awakened one, as noted by the research center, and can be considered a top expert within the realm." The military leader was quite candid, and his words were sincere, coming from the heart. He didn't notice anything wrong with Wang Cheng's vehicle. He was simply astonished by Wang Cheng's terrifying ability to ignite the ant nest. He understood that there were no white phosphorus bombs on Wang Cheng's vehicle, and conventional incendiary bombs would struggle to ignite such a large mutated ant nest so quickly. This achievement not only proved that Wang Cheng was a flame-awakened one, but also that he was among the elite within that category. Without such capability, it would have been impossible. He and the surrounding soldiers looked at Wang Cheng with a newfound respect. Meanwhile, Zheng Hailong had been glancing in this direction, his face showing signs of regret. Previously, he had felt somewhat displeased with Wang Cheng, thinking, we are all second-level awakened ones. Why does he get to join the research center and stay back while we have to charge forward? But now, his thoughts were beginning to change. Wang Cheng was clearly a person of real strength, earning the respect of the military, and with connections to the research center, such a person was worth befriending. Unfortunately, with the battle pressing on, Zheng Hailong couldn't spare the time and could only watch from a distance, hoping for another opportunity. Meanwhile, Wang Guanghua still wore an expression of discontent, muttering, what's so great about this? It was just luck. If his vehicle had been overturned on the road, it would have been a different story. Unfortunately, at that moment, no one was paying attention to him. Everyone's focus was on Wang Cheng. He had become the center of attention on the entire battlefield. What Wang Cheng didn't anticipate was that his actions would not only make him famous within the 3rd Armored Regiment and his own group, but also spread rapidly among the defenders of the base, making his name well known in the survivor base. The giant anthill was ablaze, appearing like a massive torch, impossible to miss. As the one who had successfully taken down this giant anthill, Wang Cheng became famous overnight, with Wang Cheng's battlefield achieving a breakthrough. Other fronts also managed to halt the advance of the mutated creatures. The enormous level 5 mutated giant tortoise was firmly blocked at a distance, bombarded relentlessly by military aircraft, unable to move an inch as it shrank back into its shell. Meanwhile, on the defensive line of the survivor base, the military took the opportunity to reorganize their defenses, eliminate mutated creatures, and push back, while urgently transporting supplies to fill the gaps. New orders quickly came down. Wang Cheng and his team were to continue advancing with the 3rd Armored Regiment, regroup with other units, and return to the survivor base. Chapter 140. Do you know Shubing? In the sky, a piercing shriek cut through the air. Military fighter jets flew low overhead, then climbed sharply and disappeared from view. The convoy moved slowly forward. The monster hordes on both sides were bombarded by heavy artillery, while the forces outside the survivor base were fully retracting. It wasn't just Wang Cheng and the 3rd Armored Regiment present. There were multiple other teams operating outside as well. From this perspective, even with the monsters surrounding the city, the impact on the survivor base was minimal. They could still conduct operations outside in various ways, which might explain why the survivor base had not hastily wasted manpower and resources to clear the monsters. However, from today onwards, it was clear that things had changed. All external forces were recalled, including the 3rd Armored Regiment, which had never entered the survivor base, now being led back through the main gate by the military. Su Xinghai looked outside and whispered, they are all watching us. Along the way, there were soldiers and military action groups casting sidelong glances. Clearly, they had heard that the person who ignited the anthill was here. Those gazes held both curiosity and respect. Earning the respect of soldiers was simple. As long as you fought alongside them and demonstrated admirable strength and courage, you would gain their esteem. But Wang Cheng knew that his reputation on the outer defense line wasn't what mattered most. The real issue lay in his relationship with Qin Hai. The 2 small warriors on the vehicle remained, and the armed helicopter carrying Qin Hai had already entered the city of the survivor base from the air. There weren't many airborne mutated creatures, and the anti-aircraft artillery system set up by the military was sufficient to defend against the few airborne mutated threats to the survivor base. Therefore, the airspace around the survivor base was relatively safe. The journey into the city was uneventful. In the face of strong modern military power, the threats posed by these mutated monsters were far less exaggerated than those depicted in various films and TV shows. This was also because the ancient virus infecting these mutated beings did not have such a strong transmission capability. However, if one were to consider the viruses or fungi from scenarios like a biohazard or a last survivor situation, things might turn out differently. As Wang Cheng entered the city, he increasingly realized that he seemed to have gained some notoriety. The soldiers along the way saluted him. However, when Wang Cheng got out of the vehicle and was subjected to a check, an officer approached him directly and said, Mr. Wang Cheng, hello. First, I want to thank you on behalf of the survivor base for your outstanding contributions to the defense of this city. However, there are some matters that require you to come with me to assist with our inquiries and investigations. Wang Cheng had anticipated this. Something was off about Qin Hai's situation. Even the clouds from the sky in Hai City had drifted here, almost posing a threat to the survivor base. There was an air of mystery surrounding everything, and it seemed likely that there was some unknown connection at play. Wang Cheng had previously confirmed that the bigwigs on this side were clearly aware of something. Under such circumstances, it was impossible for them not to take action. compared to the safety of the survivor base. Wang Cheng's impressive combat prowess on the battlefield was not that significant. Wang Cheng did not refuse. He slowly stood up and said, "What about my companions and my vehicle?" "Mr. Wang Cheng, we will return your vehicle to your residence, but your companions will also need to undergo the same investigation," the officer replied. Wang Cheng nodded slowly. He thought to himself that this was also an opportunity for him. Through this process, perhaps he could truly understand the truth of the apocalypse and what had happened in High City from the inquiries of others. Wang Cheng had a feeling that things were not that simple. The sooner he figured it out, the more advantageous it would be for him. However, the officer took Wang Cheng away alone, clearly separating him from Zhang Chao and Su Xinghai. Wang Cheng was led onto a sealed infantry fighting vehicle, where he couldn't see the outside situation. A medical staff member was there to help check Wang Cheng's physical condition. He had exhausted his awakening abilities and was still in recovery, feeling somewhat weak. But he believed that the forthcoming journey would not require his combat skills for anything. However, the progress of this matter was slower than the capital had anticipated. As they moved forward, the final destination seemed to be the central building of the Joint Command Center in the mid-zone of the survivor base. However, the individual was not taken upstairs. Instead, they took an elevator down to the third underground level and were confined in a room with double-sided glass, similar to an interrogation room. The treatment was quite good. An officer accompanied them throughout the process, ensuring that they did not leave the sight of military personnel. The individual's requests were met, even providing them with rare fruits and vegetables that could be sold for exorbitant prices outside. Then came a long wait, during which a doctor entered from outside and conducted a thorough examination. The individual cooperated well. After about an hour, two men in black uniforms walked in and asked some general questions. However, their inquiries were not very in-depth. They only asked about the individual's experiences in the coastal city, their relationship with a certain person, and how they had traveled from the coastal city to the survivor base. It was clearly just a routine inquiry, and the individual knew that the same questions must have been posed to others as well. However, they believed that those individuals understood the gravity of the situation and would not divulge their secrets. Thus, while answering, the individuals subtly erased any mention of their ship's involvement. If this had been before the apocalypse, ordinary university students like them would have been utterly terrified in such a situation, possibly even struggling to articulate their thoughts. Yet, after all they had been through, even the most scatterbrained among them could maintain enough composure. At the end of the questioning, one of the men in black uniforms asked a strange question. "Do you think there is something wrong with him?" The individual was slightly taken aback. "I don't quite understand. What do you mean by a problem? He seems fine to me. I haven't experienced any issues. My memories are clear and coherent. He seems more like he has lost his mind. It's inevitable that there are issues there." The two men exchanged glances but did not answer the individual's question. They simply stood up, signifying the end of the inquiry, and left the room. After they departed, the officer re-entered and said, "Mr. Wang, I apologize for keeping you waiting for so long, but so far, we have not found any issues with you. You need not worry. You will be able to leave soon. Should I be concerned about any problems?" The individual furrowed their brow. "I am not authorized to discuss that with you," the officer replied with a polite smile and slowly withdrew, leaving the individual alone in the room. The cold, double-sided glass reflected the individual's face, and they believed that someone on the other side was monitoring their every move. But what were they monitoring? These examinations and inquiries seemed unremarkable. What did they hope to gain from them? The individual felt a sense of disappointment. This was not what they had expected. These people seemed to be like riddlers, desperately trying to conceal something, and the individual had not obtained any useful information. However, the situation that Wang Cheng was most worried about did not occur. It seemed that Xinghai had truly lost his mind and did not expose the matter of Wang Cheng's warship. Zhang Chao and Su Xinghai would certainly keep the secret of the warship, but it was uncertain about Xinghai. From the current situation, it was evident that Xinghai had not revealed anything either. Of course, Wang Cheng could roughly guess this from the way he saw Xinghai at that time. It was clear that he could no longer disclose any useful information. Others would also find it difficult to obtain any valuable information from him. What he did not know was that the investigation reports of himself, Zhang Chao, Su Xinghai, and Xinghai were all laid out in front of Yi Anshan. He read through them carefully and then slowly stood up. "I want to meet this Wang Cheng." Soon, the impeccably dressed Yi Anshan appeared across the desk from Wang Cheng. Yi Anshan briefly introduced himself to Wang Cheng, not exuding an air of superiority. Instead, he created a reassuring atmosphere, with a calm expression and steady tone. However, his gaze was fixed on Wang Cheng's eyes, much like an old hunter in the forest. "We have already confirmed that you all have no issues. The key lies with Xinghai. Unfortunately, his mental state is not good. Perhaps it's because he never liked me much back in Haicheng." At this moment, Wang Cheng perked up. He had never expected to meet Yi Anshan under such circumstances. Yi Anshan was quite different from what he had imagined. His sharpness was subdued, yet he appeared even more compelling. Sitting opposite him, he seemed unremarkable, yet there was a strong sense of pressure emanating from him. Indeed, no one can be liked by everyone, especially in this day and age when people have shed their facades and become real and ugly. I want to ask you a few questions. Once I'm done, you can leave. Please go ahead, Yi Anshan indicated. Yi Anshan slowly exhaled. Do you know Xu Bing? This question stunned Wang Cheng for a moment. If it were anyone else asking this question in front of Wang Cheng, he would not have thought much of it. But this was Yi Anshan. During his time at the Fengtian survivor base, he had heard that name countless times. As the top figure in charge of Fengtian's defense appointed by the Joint Command, Yi Anshan held a high reputation at the base, and almost no one did not know or respect him. In the eyes of most ordinary people, it was Yi Anshan who saved them and established the survivor base. Of course, this was the result that the higher-ups of the Joint Command wanted, which also contributed to Yi Anshan's high prestige at the base. Nevertheless, it reflected that Yi Anshan was a top-tier figure. Standing before him, although Wang Cheng's expression was not particularly special, he immediately became fully alert. He knew very well the gap between himself and such a person. Yi Anshan was not someone those before him could compare to. He asked this question. What did Xu Bing say? Is Xu Bing also involved in these matters? Regarding this question, Wang Cheng fell silent for a moment and slowly said, I know Su Ling. Yi Anshan was slightly taken aback, then nodded and said, I know she has looked for me, and I know she came from Haicheng with you, but at this time, I think staying among the survivors is perhaps the safest choice for her, so I didn't team meet her. But you are impressive. I reviewed your information. After Su Ling failed to find me, you quickly established contact with the research center using something obtained from Haicheng and earned Professor Chen's trust. I want to know why you are so eager to connect with the higher-ups at the Fengtian survivor base. What do you want to do? I can tell you are not someone who likes to beat around the bush, so I won't waste time on useless words. After all, times have changed. Haven't they? Yi Anshan appeared quite amiable, leaning forward, getting closer to Wang Cheng across the table, with a faint smile at the corner of his mouth, showing a friendly demeanor and speaking sincerely. The previous two individuals in black uniforms had asked Wang Cheng questions that were quite peripheral, even neglecting to mention topics that should have been addressed, such as Wang Cheng's ability to navigate the Fengtian survivor base. And Xu Bing's topic seemed to have been forgotten, as it was no longer brought up by Yi Anshan. Wang Cheng didn't understand Yi Anshan's intentions. After thinking for a moment, he said, I want to hunt monsters. I also want a safe channel to hand over the items I brought from Haicheng, and I want to understand my awakening ability. Yi Anshan lowered his head, flipping through the materials he brought. I see, and it completely matches what you said. In the information you provided to Professor Chen, the items you found in Haicheng were obtained by taking them from others. Do you know what that is? Wang Cheng did not answer this question. Yi Anshan raised his head and looked at the young man before him, slowly saying, You must have seen it. Something fell from the sky that day in Haicheng. Xu Bing's report confirmed our previous investigation. It was a meteorite from outer space. Its size was actually much larger than when it fell in Haicheng. Most of it evaporated while passing through the Earth's atmosphere, then shattered in the sky over Haicheng. You might think that your items come from that celestial event, but I can assure you that it is not. It was just a rock, and there is no way it could produce a lighter. So where do you think these items you found came from? Yi Anshan sat across from Wang Cheng, and as he spoke, his expression remained unchanged. Only his eyes fixed on Wang Cheng's, seemingly trying to catch the slightest change in his face and pupils. Until now, Wang Cheng still didn't quite understand Yi Anshan's intentions. However, there was no need for him to hide anything. The only thing he wanted to conceal was his system and battleship. The lighter and the special serum actually came from the system. But when handing them over to Professor Chen, Wang Cheng had already considered that the origin of these items would become a problem. And that was precisely the significance of Wang Cheng handing over those items, a stepping stone. Not only is it about knocking on the door of the research center, but it's also a stepping stone for Wang Cheng to probe the hidden truths held by the base. Only when others want to obtain information from him can they share what they know. Yi Anshan is clearly aware of this. He has been the one talking all along, sharing much that was previously only speculated by Wang Cheng, with no one having actively mentioned it to him before. Now, this vice director Yi has tightly pursed his lips, his gaze intense, clearly indicating, I have been open, now it's your turn. Wang Cheng took a deep breath and said, I encountered a strange creature in Haicheng. They have humanoid bodies, yet possess intelligence and some bizarre technological biological devices. Everything I witnessed in Haicheng suggests that the changes in this world are not so simple. I want to know what has happened to this world. What else did you see in Haicheng? Clouds. Clouds? Immobile clouds. Wang Cheng continued. There is something very peculiar in Haicheng. The military there has never deployed fighter jets. As far as I know, there are military airports around Haicheng. Yet fighter jets rarely appear in its skies. Even the various helicopters I frequently saw in the area were hardly present in Haicheng. Then I noticed that the clouds in the sky were all motionless. Wang Cheng paused slightly, relaying the information he had obtained from Chun Guodong and others. His eyes were fixed on Yi and Shan. The clouds are problematic. He believed that the base could not possibly be unaware of this. They must have learned about the meteorite in Haicheng. Moreover, just a moment ago, a major issue almost arose at the base due to a cloud colliding with them. Others might not have noticed this detail, but how could the senior management of the base not know? You mentioned that the fleeing team from Haicheng had once used aerial formations to bomb a target, but those fighter jets were all destroyed? Wang Cheng nodded slowly. Yi Anshan stared at Wang Cheng, took a deep breath, and chuckled softly. Wang Cheng, you are still young, and it's impressive that you can express yourself like this. But you seem a bit nervous. You are too cautious when speaking to me. Don't worry, I have no ill intentions towards you or your friends. You can be completely open with me. This is our first meeting, but I'm sure you have heard my name in the survivor base. You should understand that our goals are the same. You established a connection with Professor Chun, but didn't he exploit his resources for personal gain? Instead, you used his connections to hunt monsters on the city walls. Honestly, I was a bit surprised when I saw this in your profile. No survivor clinging to Professor Chun would use his resources for such a thing. I have a good impression of you and your friends. That Qin Hai seems off. But I believe you all are fine. I also know that it was you who destroyed the ant nest just outside the city. That's impressive strength. However, what stands out to me even more is the courage you displayed. Very few survivors would dare to drive alone into a swarm of mutated creatures in that situation. I even admire you. Times are changing. Many people have passed away, and the future no longer belongs to us older generations, but to you, to people like you. No matter what makes you nervous, I don't think that's a problem. After hearing Yin Shan's words, Wang Cheng indeed realized that he seemed to be a bit too tense. Ultimately, it was still due to his lack of experience. He had no trouble answering his own questions, but the sense of tension as if facing a great enemy made Yin Shan notice the issue. Reflecting on it himself, Wang Cheng acknowledged that he had indeed been overly tense. Even if his responses were fine, they were still quite abnormal compared to Yin Shan's ease. Yin Shan acted like a familiar elder, while Wang Cheng's reactions were somewhat intense. As expected, he was still too inexperienced in this regard. All along, Wang Cheng had accumulated quite a bit of experience in fighting monsters, but he still had a long way to go in terms of communicating with people. Now that the conversation had reached this point, Wang Cheng also relaxed and exhaled. His entire state changed accordingly. He realized this gap and said, I am indeed nervous. The most important person I've met before was just the principal of my middle school. I haven't even met the principals of my high school or university, let alone someone as significant as Deputy Director Yin. You have already met Professor Chen. Yin Shan smiled and said, this conversation is quite meaningful. Although much of the information you possess overlaps with what we have, I feel there are still some reservations. So, how about this? I will tell you what you want to know, and you tell me what I want to know. How does that sound? Wang Cheng did not respond, but slowly nodded. Yin Shan continued, you want to know the secret of the apocalypse? I can tell you a few things. The first is that the meteorite came from the moon. It is a fragment of the moon. Chapter 142. The terrifying shadow. Wang Cheng was aware of that meteorite, which fell from the sky during the Great Retreat from High City, trailing a long tail of flame as it crashed to the ground. Its fall also marked the beginning of the collapse of the survivor group in High City. Later, by a twist of fate, Wang Cheng obtained 2 pieces of the stone. These 2 stones were irregular energy crystals, and they became the most important source of energy supply for Wang Cheng's current worship. He had thought about it. These might be meteorites fallen from the sky or something else from outer space. Although those irregular energy crystals surprised Wang Cheng, they still retained the state of meteorites and were not earthly materials, which meant they could be drifters from space. However, Wang Cheng never expected that these things actually came from the moon, and the wording used by Yin Shan made him pay special attention. Fragments of the moon? Yin Shan confirmed. That's right, they are fragments of the moon. You may not be aware, but about a year ago, there was a change in the distance between the moon and Earth. The distance shortened a bit. From our perspective on the Earth's surface, it's hard to notice anything, but it triggered a series of events. The tidal forces between the Earth and Moon have changed. Wang Cheng knew what tidal forces were. Tidal forces occur when the gravitational pull from a source affects an object, causing different points on that object to experience varying degrees of gravitational force due to their differing distances from the source. The Moon, as a celestial body, exerts gravitational influence that leads to phenomena such as the ebb and flow of tides on Earth, all of which are a result of tidal forces. Wang Cheng carefully recalled that he had not come across any reports regarding unusual activities related to tidal forces in recent times. However, when he looked up at Yi and Shan, he realized that even if there were reports, they might not have been released. Yi and Shan explained that the earliest changes actually began with the moon. A continent on the moon suddenly collapsed due to changes in gravitational forces, breaking apart into fragments that fell toward Earth like a torrential rain. Based on the timeline, the meteorite that landed in Haicheng was just the beginning. This time, there was no need to land on the moon to collect materials and soil. They could simply wait for these substances to come to their world, and they would also see the deep structures located beneath the lunar surface. Wang Cheng was struck by the realization that the irregular energy crystal originated from the moon. Instinctively, he looked up, but unfortunately, he was in a closed room with a ceiling above him, preventing him from seeing the moon. He suddenly thought that if the irregular energy crystal came from the deep structures of the moon, there might be a vast amount of energy crystals on the moon. If he could pilot a battleship to the moon in the future, it would be possible to directly mine high-energy ores for the battleship's use, right above his head. Are you a bit disappointed? Yi Anshan misunderstood Wang Cheng's thoughts. That's just an ordinary meteorite. It may help in lunar research, but it has almost no impact on our apocalypse. Although we haven't obtained relevant samples from the meteorite, there probably isn't much of value for humanity's current situation. Wang Cheng, upon hearing this, withdrew his wandering attention and instinctively opened his mouth. He looked at Yi Anshan's expression and realized that this deputy had clearly misjudged the situation. However, it was true that the irregular energy crystals could only be extracted for energy using battleship technology. If handed over to current human civilization, they might indeed have little practical use. From this perspective, Yi Anshan's analysis and judgment were not without merit. It seemed that the meteorite that fell in Haicheng was merely a coincidence. Previous speculations were almost worthless, and even the earlier mobs fighting over this object now appeared ridiculous. They had no idea what they were actually fighting over. However, as Wang Cheng pondered, he soon furrowed his brow. He thought of the strange organisms. Their bizarre technological devices could directly utilize the energy from those irregular energy crystals. He felt that something was amiss. He raised his head to look at Yi Anshan, remained silent for a moment, and began to share what he knew about the strange organisms and their peculiar technology. Yi Anshan listened attentively. Some of the content mentioned by Wang Cheng actually overlaps with the information he learned from Xu Bing. However, Xu Bing later fell into a prolonged coma and only woke up near the vicinity of Feng Tian. So the information Wang Cheng can provide is undoubtedly more coherent and clear. So, are your things related to those strange creatures that appeared in Haicheng? Wang Cheng did not intentionally guide the conversation, but Yi Anshan began to think broadly, linking the advanced technology lighter Wang Cheng submitted and his dual awakening ability to this point. Wang Cheng was taken aback for a moment, his mouth twitching slightly. He was so immersed in the matter of the moon fragments that he forgot there was a flaw in his earlier statement. Meanwhile, the clever Yi Anshan, following Wang Cheng's words, inadvertently filled in the gap in Wang Cheng's logic. Wang Cheng chuckled awkwardly and nodded. However, Yi Anshan's expression, which was usually relaxed, grew serious as he asked, "Did you hand it over to the military in Haicheng? That army was with Qinghai before." Wang Cheng continued to nod. Yi Anshan's expression then became somewhat unpleasant. Wang Cheng noticed this and couldn't help but ask, "Is there a problem? Didn't you and Xu Bing say that the military and survivor groups escaping from Haicheng all disappeared on the way?" Yi Anshan responded off-topic. Wang Cheng frowned and said, "I heard it from someone, and along this journey, if I told you that just a few minutes ago, I was still on the phone with the person in charge of the survivor base at Pingfeng Mountain outside Haicheng, would you believe it?" Before Wang Cheng could finish his sentence, he was interrupted by Yi Anshan. In the room, Yi Anshan leaned forward, his gaze intensely fixed on Wang Cheng's eyes. Wang Cheng's pupils constricted. "Is this true? Qinghai, the person you know, has gone mad, very mad. In the past half-day, our people spent quite some time piecing together snippets of information from him. But we learned from him that they came out of Haicheng intending to go to Pingfeng Mountain, but were ambushed on the way. Qinghai escaped by balloon. And according to him, the soldiers around him, led by Commander Zhang Rui, have all been wiped out." Yi Anshan's words truly shocked Wang Cheng, and he blurted out, "How is that possible?" Yi Anshan replied, "This is also what we are puzzled about. If you want to know how our world became like this, I can answer you like this. We also want to know. I just mentioned that initially, the distance between the Earth and the Moon changed, and everyone's attention was focused on the sky, but they did not notice the changes on Earth. You have a background in science and engineering, so you should know that our Earth's ecosystem is incredibly vast and has self-repairing capabilities. Even if the distance between the Earth and the Moon changes and tidal forces intensify, they are not so drastic, theoretically within the adaptive range of the Earth's repair capabilities. In the past few months, we have suddenly discovered that changes have intensified in various corners of the Earth. Ancient glaciers are melting, the height of certain peaks has decreased by 3 centimeters, and the Arctic and Antarctic regions are not to be mentioned. Ancient viruses are reviving on the planet, spreading with the wind, and they had already permeated the globe a month ago. At that time, they had not yet exhibited extreme mutation characteristics, coexisting with humanity in a subtle manner. We once believed this state would continue, much like bats coexisting peacefully with numerous ancient viruses. However, recently, they have begun to change wildly. Our civilization has been cut off, and information has become obstructed. The only thing we can be certain of now is that behind all this, there is some terrifying shadow driving everything forward. Initially, We thought it was an invasion by extraterrestrial civilizations, but if that were the case, we would have been long dead, and there would have been no opportunity to establish survivor bases. Our experts suggest that they might be some form of evolved supervirus, fungi, or bacteria, possessing intelligence and infiltrating everywhere, growing like ghosts in unseen places, even affecting human brains, altering cognition, causing massive disorientation in information, and even terrifying collective hallucinations. To be honest, we have secretly investigated almost all survivors who came from a certain city, and they all believe that the fleeing group from that city encountered a disaster. Yet, we have made contact with people from that city. We do not know what happened there. Our expert team went to a nearby mountain, but the communication they sent back became strange immediately. The only conclusion we can draw now is that something significant has gone wrong with that city and all its inhabitants. Chapter 143. The invitation from Yi Anshan. Yi Anshan spoke rapidly, and Wang Cheng felt a chill. He had come from that city and had struggled to survive there for a long time. He knew almost nothing about what Yi Anshan was saying. He only felt uneasy at that time. The still clouds in the sky and the eerie, urgent retreat now felt increasingly wrong. Moreover, along the way, so many people said that the fleeing group from that city had encountered a disaster, even disappearing completely. How could it be that upon reaching the survivor base here, they claimed everything was fine and that a survivor base had even been established outside that city? Everything felt strange. Wang Cheng stared blankly at Yi Anshan in front of him, suddenly recalling a phrase he had read a long time ago. If you feel that something is wrong with the world, it may not be the world that is wrong, but rather you who are. This thought led him to another chilling idea. Could it be that the problem lies with him, or with the survivor base? Didn't Yi Anshan mention that? The microorganisms currently infecting humans possess the ability to alter human cognitive processes, even inducing mass hallucinations. So, is it possible that individuals like Wang Cheng and Yi Anshan are not truly alive, but rather mutated monsters, while those they perceive as monsters are the actual living beings? Thinking in this reverse manner seems to explain everything. Why did the escape team from Haicheng suddenly vanish? Because individuals like Wang Cheng had already died at that moment and could no longer be seen. However, Wang Cheng's moment of panic did not last long. He quickly regained his composure. He realized the biggest flaw in his reasoning: the system, the warship. While the human brain can deceive itself, the systems and the warships that exist in reality cannot. The destruction he caused while piloting the warship cannot be false. The problem does not lie with him, but with Haicheng. Wang Cheng's gaze soon cleared, and he looked up to see a look of approval in Yi Anshan's eyes. I thought you would need more time to think. Your resolve is strong. I should have met you sooner, but it's not too late now. Yi Anshan continued. In fact, there are places similar to Haicheng. Our survivor base in Fengtian has been on high alert, neither expanding nor contacting other survivor bases. Precisely because we cannot clearly assess the situation. We do not know what is happening elsewhere. Moreover, what I just told you is merely the current speculation of the research center, lacking any concrete verification. Therefore, we still do not fully understand what has transpired or the origins of many bizarre phenomena. However, we must uncover the true nature of these shadows. Mutated organisms may not necessarily destroy us, but if we allow these shadows to grow unchecked, we will all be consumed. Haicheng is currently the largest affected area we know of. If the people on Pingfeng Mountain truly have problems, then this incident has impacted tens of thousands of people. Do you understand the implications of this? Our world is becoming unfamiliar. If we do nothing or turn a blind eye, then soon, this world will no longer belong to us. No matter how glorious our past civilization was, we will face extinction, just like the dinosaurs of the past, and our civilization will come to an end. Wang Cheng felt a chill run down his spine. He seemed to see endless shadows surging from the darkness, devouring one resilient ember of humanity after another, ultimately plunging the world into darkness. This was far more terrifying than the threats posed by the visible mutated organisms outside. If the situation escalates further, it would lead to a catastrophic disaster from which no one could escape. How can one survive when the nest is destroyed? Wang Cheng had just begun to relax upon arriving at the Fengtian survivor base, but at that moment, listening to Yi Anshan's words, his heart sank again. As he realized the severity of the entire incident from Yi Anshan's brief descriptions, he is a witness to the Haicheng incident. He knows very well how terrifying that situation was. It is essential to understand what happened. Otherwise, next time it could be him. And he wouldn't even know how he died. Moreover, he must become stronger quickly. 5th-level battleships, 6th-level battleships, 7th-level battleships, and even future fleets. If the world becomes unfamiliar, besides preventing changes in the world, there is another way: to detach himself from the world's environment and no longer rely on the Earth for survival. If a fleet can be formed, this could also be a solution. Of course, if that day really comes, Wang Cheng believes that regardless of the source of the apocalypse, he will have the strength to crush it completely. Wang Cheng took a deep breath, looked at Yi Anshan, and said, Deputy Yi, I understand your point. So, after saying so much, what do you want me to do? At first, I just wanted to gather more information from you. I didn't plan to say so much. But just now, my thoughts changed. I admire you, Wang Cheng. You are one of the most outstanding awakeners I have ever seen. Not only are you powerful and courageous, but you also think quickly and have enough composure. I want to invite you. Yi Anshan had been relaxed and candid, answering almost everything Wang Cheng asked. Join the Awakeners team? Wang Cheng frowned. His situation was far more special than Yi Anshan imagined. With the battleships and system in place, joining the Awakeners team would only limit him and slow down his growth. No, of course not. I respect your choice. You can join the research center. I believe you have your own judgment. I can share some more information with you. Recently, we are organizing a second investigation team to prepare for Haiqing and Pingfeng Mountain. And this team needs absolutely reliable and strong people as guides. Ideally, the guide should understand the situation in Haiqing and be somewhat local. Yi Anshan paused, looking at Wang Cheng, as his meaning was already very clear. This was Yi Anshan's invitation. He wanted to invite Wang Cheng to join this team to investigate the source of the apocalypse at Haiqing and Pingfeng Mountain. Wang Cheng fell into brief silence regarding the invitation. Yi Anshan slowly stood up, walked to Wang Cheng's side, and patted his shoulder, saying, "It's okay. I know you just came from Haiqing, and that area is very dangerous right now. In this situation, asking you to return to Haiqing is indeed a difficult choice. Therefore, you don't need to give me an answer now. 2 days later, you can find the officer who brought you here, whether you agree or refuse. I need a clear answer. If you refuse, it won't be an issue. But if you choose to join, you can rest assured that your parents and friends will receive the best treatment. Within the territory, as long as I am alive, no one can harm them." Yi Anshan's words were very powerful, and in this survivor base, he indeed had the confidence to say such things and act on them. After saying this, Yi Anshan patted Wang Cheng on the shoulder and turned to walk outside. Just as he was about to open the door, he paused slightly and said, "Let Xiao Su come find me later. To be honest, I don't know how to talk to her about these things. Rather than saying I'm deliberately avoiding her, it's more accurate to say I'm afraid to see her. Moreover, the situation at the survivor base is far from as simple as she thinks. This is also a reminder for you, Wang Cheng, whether you refuse or agree with me. I must warn you to be cautious of anyone who tries to approach or win you over." Wang Cheng watched Yi Anshan's retreating figure, and at one moment, he even thought about revealing his battleship and system to him to gain military support. However, Yi Anshan's final words made him dismiss that thought once again. Human society is complex at all times. Perhaps if he revealed his secrets now, he could receive Yi Anshan's help and even develop things in the direction he hoped for. Yet, this would undoubtedly pull both him and Yi Anshan into a larger whirlpool. If things spiraled out of control, it would lead to endless trouble. Thus, Wang Cheng ultimately chose silence. Another key point was that his battleship was becoming increasingly powerful with the rise in levels, and he had to personally kill enemies to obtain energy points. Under these two conditions, his need for military assistance was diminishing. Collaborating with the military was no longer as necessary as it had been in the beginning. Therefore, rather than risking so much to cooperate, it was better to remain silent. Yi Anshan exited the room, and shortly after, the officer who had brought Wang Cheng here came in, left contact information, and took Wang Cheng away. Chapter 144. Wang Cheng's choice. Through the officer's introduction, Wang Cheng learned that Su Xinghai and Zhang Chao had already returned. He should have left after the previous inquiries, but he was kept back because of Yi Anshan. By the time he stepped outside, the sky had completely darkened. The night was shrouded in darkness, and the wind was a bit chilly. The clouds in the sky drifted slowly, and in the distance, thick smoke from the battlefield at the edge of the survivor base billowed upwards, slowly merging with the sky. The intense sounds of gunfire from earlier in the day, meant to seal the breach, had long since disappeared, replaced by the usual intermittent gunfire. This indicated that the defenses around the survivor base had stabilized, with no significant monster sieges occurring. The guarding soldiers only needed to ensure they killed a few monsters that got too close. Wang Cheng felt a bit dazed. He didn't know when it had started, but he found the sound of gunfire oddly familiar, as if it had become a part of his life. The words Yi Anshan had just spoken echoed in his mind. Standing under the dark sky, watching the officers and soldiers coming in and out of the command building, he felt an unprecedented sense of dislocation. He suddenly found himself reminiscing about life before the apocalypse. At that time, he had no warships, no systems. But he didn't have to worry about survival every day, nor did he need to think too far into the future. Even though his future was uncertain back then, it wasn't as terrifying and unsettling as the things and changes he faced now. Since the apocalypse began and he was reborn with a system, he always felt as if he was walking on the edge of a cliff. With every step he took, the cliff beside him would make strange sounds, and stones would tumble down into the endless abyss below. It felt like standing at the brink of a precipice. After arriving in Fengtian and finding his parents, this feeling improved slightly, But Wang Cheng's thoughts became more urgent. His sense of responsibility was becoming clearer than ever. He had to protect his family, and also protect Su Xinghai and others. At the very least, he needed to ensure that those who followed him and were by his side had not chosen the wrong person, and that they would survive. For this reason, Wang Cheng always felt uneasy. He could not ignore the anomalies he experienced in Haicheng. He had been searching for answers to the problems. He sensed that what he was seeing now might only be the tip of the iceberg. Now, Yi Yanshan had provided him with some answers. But the rest was something even Yi Yanshan did not know. Wang Cheng's footsteps paused slightly. He stood in front of the headquarters building. Most of the people around him were hurrying by, mostly staff from the Fengtian headquarters, from various departments. Wang Cheng had become well known on the front lines today, and not many people here recognized him. Even if someone did, they would only glance at him from a distance before moving on. This was no longer the time before the apocalypse. Everyone was striving for survival, for themselves, for their families, for the survivor base, rather than greeting strangers. It was better to quickly take care of their own affairs. So what about him? How should he choose in response to the question Yi Yanshan posed? Should he ignore the larger shadow lurking beneath the surface of the iceberg, continue living his life, be with his family, and gradually upgrade his warship? Or should he find out just how terrifying the shadow beneath the iceberg really was? After understanding it, should he confront it directly? Wang Cheng had a feeling that if he chose the former, he might continue the calm and orderly life he desired. But one day, both the iceberg above and below the water would melt, and the rising sea levels would ultimately submerge his life. On the other hand, if he chose the latter, he felt he would immediately lose this brief peace and tranquility, plunging into the same sense of uncertainty he experienced at the beginning of the apocalypse in Haicheng. But just then, he sensed footsteps approaching from behind. Wang Cheng turned his head and saw an unfamiliar, aged face. It was an elderly man with a slightly stooped posture, who jumped down from a military vehicle behind him, scrutinizing Wang Cheng, who was standing at the door. His status seemed to be quite high. As he got out of the car, someone immediately followed him, watching Wang Cheng warily but not daring to disturb the elderly man. Wang Cheng looked at him in confusion and said, "You are blocking the entrance to the headquarters." The first words that the old man spoke made Wang Cheng feel embarrassed. Wang Cheng looked around, and sure enough, it seemed he was indeed somewhat in the way. Seeing the young person who had just been lost in his own world show a flustered expression, the old man laughed like a child who had just played a prank. He was nearly 70 years old, and his face was full of wrinkles when he smiled, yet his eyes sparkled with a certain brilliance. His spirit, Emil, had not aged like his body. He laughed and reached out to pull Wang Cheng, who was eager to leave, saying, "It's all right, kid. Everyone has moments when they can't figure out their life's path. So, thinking about life regardless of time or place is nothing to laugh at. Which department are you from? I don't think I've seen you before." His strength was not enough to pull Wang Cheng back. It was the old man's words that brought Wang Cheng back to the moment. He looked at the old man in confusion and replied, "I'm not from any department. I'm here today." Wang Cheng was unsure how to explain why he was there, but the old man just paused for a moment, then smiled and shook his head. "Ah, I see. No wonder I don't recognize you. Although I rarely get out and walk, I come in and out of here every day and have seen most of the people working here, so I usually recognize their faces. So, can you tell me how I can know you?" Wang Cheng opened his mouth, unsure of how to respond to that question. He felt no animosity towards the old man. In fact, he found him very warm and friendly. Coupled with their earlier conversation, he felt a bit ashamed of his slow response. However, the old man seemed not to need any positive answer from Wang Cheng. He just smiled and patted Wang Cheng on the shoulder, saying, "It's hard to describe, isn't it? That's always the case with questions. Before the end, after the end, the essence of the troubles remains the same. But, kid, times have changed. In the past, we could avoid problems, whatever they were. As long as the nation and human society exist, we could just lay back and live, as long as we abandon other needs. It's quite simple to do so. But now it's different. If today you are holding the last cookie, but can't see that tomorrow there will be no food, you and your loved ones will pay the price for your avoidance with your lives. Children and the elderly will be the first to starve, then you young people. Because the nations and societies that allowed people to survive in the simplest ways are facing great troubles, they can no longer protect everyone in this civilization. No matter what trouble you encounter, rely on yourself." The old man's words struck Wang Cheng's heart like nails. What he said seemed unrelated to Wang Cheng's thoughts about the answer he wanted to give Yi Yanshan, but he provided Wang Cheng with an answer. He could not stand by idly. Otherwise, when disaster struck and floods washed everything away, perhaps with a system and battleships, he wouldn't have to pay much of a price. But what about the people around him? Even if he could use the system and battleships to protect his family and friends, those systems and battleships belonged to him. And there would always be moments when he couldn't cover everything. At that moment, it was the end of everything. There was no time left for anything. The king realized that he had been deceived by the calm life at the survivor base in the capital, almost becoming lost in it. However, the threat still existed. The shifting shadows of the coastal city could collapse an entire division, a fleeing group of over 100,000 people. Once such shadows expanded and engulfed the capital, it was only a matter of time. Even the two cloud formations encountered today served as a warning. The capital was not a truly safe place to relax and develop. In a global apocalypse, no place was absolutely secure. Any survivor base could be wiped out overnight. Instead of seeking shelter under a giant tree, it was better to become the tree that sheltered others. Only in this way could one achieve absolute and genuine safety. The answer began to take shape in the king's mind. He had to go. Yi and Shan had mentioned that the last group they sent had disappeared without a trace, highlighting the dangers of the nearby mountains. Because of this, with a system and superior battleships, he needed to go personally. He had to understand what was truly happening there. While the capital still existed and his family was safe at present, he needed to act decisively, uncover the truth behind this apocalypse, and upgrade his battleships with all his might. Not only did he need to become stronger, but he also needed to identify who his enemies were and then destroy them. Problems could not be ignored. They had to be confronted and eradicated before they turned into dangers. This was the king's resolution. Waiting passively was not an option. Now that he recognized the existence of problems, he had to act swiftly to extinguish any dangers in their infancy. Moreover, as he contemplated, an unprecedented and radical thought emerged in his mind to completely resolve the issue. To achieve absolute safety, there was only one way forward: upgrade, upgrade, and upgrade again. Then, collaborate with the military to thoroughly end the terrifying apocalyptic disaster sweeping the world and restore civilization to its state before the outbreak. With a system and battleships, achieving this was not impossible. Instead of waiting for the military to take action, since he had a system and battleships, why should he remain passive? Only by doing so could he eliminate all dangers, allowing him to develop more freely and effectively. In the face of the capabilities demonstrated by his system and battleships, the Earth seemed insignificant. Perhaps the stars and the ocean were the true future. The old man's brief words had completely awakened the king. He realized that his previous vision and thoughts had been too narrow. A person without long-term worries would surely have immediate troubles. By focusing too closely, he had been overly anxious. However, if he broadened his perspective, the current issues were no longer problems at all. Before the battleships and system he possessed, no mutated creatures or apocalyptic crises were truly concerning. Even the entire civilization and planet seemed small. From this perspective, the path forward became instantly clear. When Wang Cheng came to his senses, he found that the old man and the military vehicle had disappeared. He was momentarily stunned, having wanted to thank the other party, but ultimately could only shake his head and walk towards the residential area of the Feng Tian survivor base. He headed straight for his own community, his steps becoming quicker and more resolute. He had already realized what he wanted. Perhaps the protagonists in other stories needed to survive in a post-apocalyptic world, struggling to stay alive. But for Wang Cheng, what he needed to do was to use advanced technology warships to end this sudden apocalypse. Opening the next era was what he should be doing. Therefore, his first goal was to figure out what the shadow over Haicheng truly was. Then, he would grow to a point where he could stand shoulder to shoulder with the entire Feng Tian survivor base, and, as a top warship captain, officially cooperate with the current human civilization, gathering the power of civilization to reverse this apocalypse. He aimed to become the helmsman of humanity's great vessel in the face of disaster. Chapter 145, the Pingfeng Mountain Operation. When he returned to the community, the Feng Tian survivor base had plunged into darkness due to a power-saving policy, but people were still awake. Even Ma Tian was waiting to see when Wang Cheng would return. This time, it was evident that Wang Cheng and the others being taken away was somewhat special. Su Xinghai and Zhang Chao, among others, were feeling anxious, not knowing why Wang Cheng hadn't returned quickly with them. Yu Jixing and others, clinging to Wang Cheng, naturally couldn't sleep either. It wasn't until Wang Cheng came back and personally reassured everyone that he was fine that they finally felt a bit relieved. Ma Tian also showed a look of relief, though it was unclear whether he was worried about Wang Cheng or regretting that Wang Cheng hadn't been taken out. He stepped forward and exchanged pleasantries. Wang Cheng casually mentioned the invitation from Yi and Shan, and Ma Tian immediately understood. Although he didn't say much on the surface, he was secretly alarmed, feeling an increased sense of caution and respect towards Wang Cheng and his group. He had thought that Wang Cheng being taken away would lead to trouble, but it turned out to be related to Deputy Commander Yi. That was a significant connection. The level above that was completely out of Ma Tian's reach, and he had never even heard of such figures. His conversation with Wang Cheng now even carried a hint of flattery. However, Wang Cheng was not in the mood to engage in a battle of wits with Ma Tian. He had made up his mind, and his vision opened up like never before, placing Ma Tian and his matters beneath his notice. He spoke to Ma Tian just to lay the groundwork and intimidate him. I not only have connections with research institutions, but now Deputy Commander Yi is also on my side. so you handle it as you see fit. After Ma Tian left, Wang Cheng gathered his people, including Yu Jisheng, to announce that he would follow the military to investigate the situation around Haicheng and Pingfeng Mountain. Hearing that Wang Cheng was returning to Haicheng, everyone was a bit surprised. Su Xinghai was the first to speak. Wang Cheng, you need to think this through. With Qinghai's situation today and the obvious issues over in Haicheng, we need to be cautious. Zhang Xiao, on the other hand, didn't have as many reservations as Su Xinghai and said directly, the boss makes a good point, but if you, ergo, have decided to go, then I will go with you. Yu Jisheng and the others also looked worried. However, Wang Cheng shook his head and said, I've already made up my mind about this. I must go to Haicheng and see the situation for myself. There are indeed issues there, but if we don't take the initiative to find out what's really going on, when trouble comes knocking, we will only be passively taking hits. Also, this matter was invited by Yi Anshan, so you don't need to worry. I will be acting with the military team, and safety is guaranteed. Besides, you all know what I am capable of, but because of that, I can't take you with me. Old San, you all stay behind. This time, I will go alone. And old you can rest assured. Yi Anshan has guaranteed that I will be safe during the operation, and no one would dare to harm you under his protection. You can trust me on this. With these few words, Wang Cheng settled the whole matter. Su Xinghai glanced at Wang Cheng and suddenly felt a change in him. As if something had shifted in just half a day. It was this feeling that made Su Xinghai refrain from further persuasion. He realized that Wang Cheng's decision was not impulsive. He trusted Wang Cheng. Since that was the case, let Wang Cheng handle his own affairs. Su Xinghai simply said, Don't worry, I've got this here. When are you leaving? Not in a hurry. It shouldn't be within 2 days. Wang Cheng nodded, stood up, and called Su Ling out. Upon hearing that Wang Cheng had met Yi Anshan, Su Ling's expression became a bit off, and she silently followed Wang Cheng out. Su Ling was younger than Wang Cheng and not as mature. Hearing all this made her feel anxious and uncomfortable. She was worried about her father's situation, and uncomfortable about Yi Anshan knowing she had sought him out but not meeting her. The memory of Uncle Yi being warm and kind felt distant, and now, in this apocalyptic era, it left her with an indescribable sadness. However, Wang Cheng called Su Ling out precisely for this matter. He first mentioned Yi Anshan's situation and then pointed the way for Su Ling. I believe that Deputy Ye's reasons are not just to brush me off. He genuinely cares about your situation. Now, you can choose. If you want to see him, you can go anytime. Upon hearing this, Su Ling's expression grew even more complicated, and she remained silent for a long time. Wang Cheng didn't say anything more. The relationship between Yi Anshan and the Su family was none of his business. How these two handled their relationship was up to Su Ling and Deputy Yi. After that, Wang Cheng went to see his parents. Wang Cheng, in order to avoid worrying the two elders, did not mention his intention to return to Haicheng. Instead, he stated that he had excelled on the battlefield today and gained the military's attention. He was to cooperate with the research center and the military in a secret test at the survivor base in Fengtian. However, this test would be fully enclosed, and it seemed he would not return for a while. Upon hearing this, his parents were both surprised and pleased. They were happy for their son's advancement, but worried about the dangers of him getting involved with the military and the research center. Compared to the so-called future, power, and status, the safety and health of their child were always their top priority. Wang Cheng understood that this was an inevitable choice. After reassuring his parents, he briefed Su Xinghai and others. The next morning, he proactively approached the officer from the previous day to express his willingness. The officer was not surprised and simply smiled, saying, Deputy, you guessed correctly, Mr. Wang Cheng. You need to arrive here before 3 p.m. tomorrow for assembly. Our team will depart promptly at 4 p.m. So don't be late. You may bring your own vehicle and personal belongings. Wang Cheng was somewhat surprised. We are departing in the afternoon? That means we'll be traveling at night after leaving the city? The officer nodded, exactly. We hope you can hurry and reach the Pingfeng Mountain survivor base during the day. Wang Cheng, upon hearing this, appeared contemplative and did not ask further. Returning to his community, he found Xiaqin helping to pack things up for him, preparing quite a few items. Fortunately, since Wang Cheng would be departing in a warship, there was enough space for everything. By noon the next day, Wang Cheng set off in his car toward the assembly point. Upon arrival, he spotted a familiar face he hadn't seen in a long time, Xu Bing. She had returned to her usual cold demeanor and said, The higher-ups have decided that I will share a vehicle with you. It seemed that all previous grievances and friendships with Wang Cheng had vanished, and she treated him as if they were meeting for the first time. However, she cast a glance at the dark small truck behind Wang Cheng and coldly warned, I know you have many tricks up your sleeve, but I advise you not to have any other intentions. This operation at Pingfeng Mountain is very important. If you breach any regulations or I catch you doing something out of line, I will execute you on the spot. Wang Cheng suddenly had a feeling that Yi Anshan had assigned Xu Bing to ride with him to keep an eye on him. This wasn't impossible. Although Yi Anshan was polite to Wang Cheng on the surface, he wasn't from a prestigious background, and it was normal to be monitored during such an important operation. Before Wang Chung could say anything, the military's person in charge of the Pingfeng Mountain operation, LV Fong, approached. He was a man with a square face, in his 30s. Not particularly tall, but he had a sturdy and reliable presence. It was hard to imagine that such a person would be in charge of this operation. He shook hands with Wang Chung enthusiastically. "I know you, the awakened one from the research center that burned down the giant ant nest the day before yesterday. Impressive. Truly impressive. I'm not an awakened one myself, but I greatly admire your kind, especially those with such power." As Wang Chung conversed with him, he realized that this Lu Fong, who appeared honest and simple, was actually quite shrewd. His words were carefully chosen, creating a sense of warmth and familiarity. And although they had just met, they quickly closed the distance, even extracting quite a bit of information about Wang Chung. However, Lu Fong also introduced the entire team to Wang Chung. The composition of the team was quite similar to before, consisting of military personnel, researchers from the center, members of the Awakened Combat Team, and a few special talents like Wang Chung recruited from ordinary survivors. There were quite a number of them, with a large convoy of over 10 vehicles, totaling around 100 people. From the research center, a young female professor named Zhang Tsongtong was sent. She was 35 years old, attractive, and didn't look her age at all, exuding a mature charm. However, she was extremely demanding, making the researchers and young soldiers sweat profusely while loading various instruments onto the vehicles, as nothing they did seemed to meet her standards. In the Awakened Combat Team, Wang Guanghua and Zheng Hailong were prominently present, but this time, they were no longer the highest-ranking members of the team. The head of the Awakened Combat Team was a burly man named He Dong, one of the earliest second-level Awakened ones, a force to be reckoned with. Known for having killed a third-level mutated creature by snapping its neck. Seemingly hearing the commotion, He Dong turned his head and coldly glanced over, his indifferent gaze sweeping over Wang Chung before quickly moving away, as if he were looking at a passerby. Each group had its own effective leader, with Lu Fong serving as the overall leader of the entire operation. At 4 o'clock sharp, the team gathered and set off in a grand procession. The Pingfeng Mountain operation was officially underway. Chapter 146. The odd atmosphere as they departed from the survivor base in Fengtian, Wang Chung felt an uncomfortable sensation, as if something was pricking at his back. This discomfort was due to Xu Bing sitting in the passenger seat, staring at him intently. Wang Chung attempted several times to strike up a conversation with her, hoping to discuss their experiences since they had last parted, but he could not keep the conversation going. Xu Bing seemed uninterested in forming a connection with him. No matter what Wang Chung said, she hardly responded, and even with his efforts, the dialogue fizzled out. Wang Chung thought to himself, "I didn't try this hard when I was pursuing my junior classmate back in elementary school." Xu Bing was indeed focused on her task. One of her responsibilities was to keep an eye on Wang Chung and stay alert to their surroundings. Having previously worked with him, she was aware of his capabilities and naturally did not dare to let her guard down. Wang Chung could probably understand this, but the atmosphere felt a bit awkward nonetheless. In this convoy, apart from LV Fong, the others are not easy to get along with. Professor Zhang Tsongtong, who is said to be an expert in microbiology and genetic engineering, is very beautiful but quite arrogant. In the convoy, she even looks down on LV Fong, staying in her vehicle and protecting her research equipment like a treasure. As the only expert team for this operation, Zhang Tsongtong's status is self-evident. Despite her expert temperament, LV Fong has always been polite, which only makes Zhang Tsongtong feel superior. However, everyone knows they are from the research center, so no one dares to provoke them. On the other hand, He Dong seems to be on vacation. Although praised by LV Fong for his exceptional abilities, he has never engaged with the small-scale mutated creatures they encountered along the way, mostly letting Wang Guanghua and others cooperate with the military to eliminate them. Their journey has been slow and meandering, taking nearly an entire night, but they are close to reaching the survivor base at Pingfeng Mountain. Wang Chung learned from LV Fong that not everyone knows the purpose of this operation, apart from a few leaders and key figures. The rest only receive the task of exchanging information and intelligence with the Pingfeng Mountain survivor base and sharing the current research findings on the apocalypse. Yi and Shan mentioned that the matters discussed are too significant, and the fewer people who know, the better. This operation is fundamentally an investigation, and the fewer people who are aware of it, the lower the risk of exposing the true purpose. Additionally, their journey has been planned by the military, with 3 drones continuously patrolling 5 kilometers ahead of the convoy to ensure a smooth passage. Their journey has been much easier than when Wang Chung came, with no dangers encountered, allowing them to reach the area near Pingfeng Mountain smoothly. However, it is still dark, and they have not moved forward but instead set up camp a few kilometers away from Pingfeng Mountain, waiting for dawn to proceed. Wang Chung has a feeling that LV Fong and the others are more wary of the survivor base at Pingfeng Mountain than of the wilderness shrouded in darkness. They light a campfire in the wilderness, and everyone gathers around, except for Zhang Tsongtong from the research center, who prefers to stay away from the group of soldiers. As dawn approaches, Xu Bing sits with Wang Cheng in a corner by the campfire, while Wang Cheng stares blankly at a corner of Pingfeng Mountain in the distance. Pingfeng Mountain is located several dozen kilometers outside Haiqing, with a village at its foot. Its relatively flat summit resembles a platform, which is how it got its name. Once an important tourist destination around Haiqing, it boasted a large resort, making it the chosen site for the military to establish a survivor base during the mass evacuation. The mountain structure can form a natural barrier, and the farmland below can be used for agriculture, making it an ideal location for a survivor base that is both defensible and capable of offense. From his vantage point, the cloud cover above Pingfeng Mountain seems to have remained still since the very beginning. Wang Qing wonders if this is an unusual cloud formation and considers taking the opportunity to observe it for an extended period. However, before he can take a closer look, he hears slow footsteps approaching from one side. He Dong walked over from the other side, wearing a military short-sleeved shirt. His muscles were so well-defined that the fabric clung tightly to his body, showcasing his chiseled physique. Standing in front of Wang Cheng, he resembled a mountain peak. Wang Cheng looked up at him, silently wondering what this guy's sudden approach meant. He Dong was also observing Wang Cheng. After a moment, he slowly spoke. You should know why we are here. I understand you come from a coastal city, and I respect your strength. However, I must warn you that this is a military operation. If I find any unusual behavior from you, attempting to expose our objectives to anyone from your city, I will break your neck. Trust me. Wang Cheng hadn't expected him to come over just to say such things, and he frowned slightly, feeling a bit displeased. These words didn't hold much weight, but the condescending and distrustful tone made Wang Cheng uncomfortable. It seemed to Dong that Wang Cheng, as someone from a coastal city, might betray them upon arriving at Pingfeng Mountain. Dong didn't give Wang Cheng a chance to respond, quickly shifting his gaze to Xu Bing, who was sitting next to Wang Cheng. He softly said, "You too." After delivering this message, Dong turned and walked back to his position like a mountain, taking a brief rest. In the distance, Lu Fang glanced over, showing a contemplative expression but didn't approach or say anything. Wang Cheng looked at Xu Bing, clearly noting that those from the coastal city were not trusted within the team. However, Dong was different from Zheng Hailong and Wang Guanghua. He expressed his thoughts directly. In his eyes, neither Wang Cheng nor Xu Bing was special. They were teammates, and if there were any issues, he wouldn't hesitate to take action. This attitude, however, left a somewhat uncomfortable feeling. As the daylight fully brightened, Wang Cheng and his team set off again towards Pingfeng Mountain. At that moment, Lu Fang had already established contact with the military on Pingfeng Mountain through the vehicle's communication system. Before long, as they neared Pingfeng Mountain, military vehicles emerged to guide Wang Cheng and the others up the mountain. Unlike the survivor base in Fengtian that was surrounded by monsters, the survivor base at Pingfeng Mountain was not encircled by any creatures. The ground was scattered with signs of previous bombardments, indicating that fierce battles had once taken place here. However, those marks were mostly found at the foot and mid-section of the mountain, gradually fading as they went higher. The survivor base at Pingfeng Mountain began to come into view for Wang Cheng and the others. According to the information Wang Cheng had received from the military, the large group fleeing from the coastal city had successfully evacuated 2 days prior to reaching Pingfeng Mountain, where they began establishing the survivor base. The military personnel at the Pingfeng Mountain survivor base numbered nearly 10,000, while the remaining survivors exceeded 30,000. However, the exact figures had not been obtained by the Fengtian survivor base. In fact, when Wang Cheng saw the details regarding the Pingfeng Mountain survivor base, he felt a distinct sense of dislocation. On his escape from the coastal city, the news he heard was completely different from the information about the nearby region. No one had seen the large group fleeing from the coastal city. If they truly reached Pingfeng Mountain the next day, why had no one encountered them? Had they somehow traversed a wormhole and arrived directly at Pingfeng Mountain? Wang Cheng suppressed his unease and looked ahead, knowing that the answer would soon be revealed as the survivor base at Pingfeng Mountain appeared before him, in stark contrast to the almost established survivor base nearby. This place was in a state of disarray, lacking even a clear protective wall. The land rose gently with many dilapidated temporary shelters scattered about, while a few military personnel stood guard on either side. The main structure of the former resort had not changed much at all. At first glance, this survivor base seemed less like a refuge and more like a neglected site. What was even stranger was that as they were being led forward, the soldiers around them and the survivors within the base all set down their belongings, standing stiffly and looking up at the convoy passing by. Wang Cheng had encountered similar situations when entering the other survivor bases. Even in apocalyptic conditions, the human tendency to gawk at newcomers remained. But today, he felt something was off. The vehicles continued to move at the same speed, with Lu Fang's lead vehicle closely following the guide vehicle of the Pingfeng Mountain survivor base. Xu Bing, sitting in the front passenger seat, rarely spoke up. The atmosphere feels a bit off. As soon as she said this, Wang Qing suddenly realized what was wrong. It was too quiet. This silence didn't mean a lack of sound, but rather a lack of noise. In a survivor base with tens of thousands of people, even amidst the chaos and harsh conditions of the apocalypse, there should be noise from the many people watching the newcomers. Yet, as they drove in, they heard almost no commotion. The entire Pingfeng Mountain survivor base was shrouded in an eerie silence. Wang Qing felt a chill run down his spine amidst the unsettling atmosphere. Even before reaching the innermost part of the base, he felt uneasy, and regarding Shubbing's comment, he simply said, the answer should come soon. The military had already sent a group of people ahead. As long as we can find them, we will definitely get answers. Chapter 147, Wang Qing, Run. Wang Qing's first thought upon arriving at the Pingfeng Mountain survivor base was to find Zhang Ruizhen. He has quite a few acquaintances in Haiqing, and he believes it won't be a problem as long as he can find them. However, Wang Qing is not acting alone now. He came in with the convoy of the survivor base in Pingfeng Mountain, and they have been welcomed in without any opportunity to leave the group. As the leader of the team, Lu Fang was able to meet with the higher-ups at the command center in Pingfeng Mountain, while Wang Qing and the others were all settled in a guest house with a yard behind the resort at the foot of Pingfeng Mountain. It was evident that the construction of the survivor base in Pingfeng Mountain was still in its early stages. The location assigned to Wang Qing and his group was on the outskirts of the resort, and looking back from their guest house, they saw a desolate wasteland. Under the influence of the global terror evolution virus, many plants had become more vibrant, but many others had perished, failing to evolve or mutate, and losing their lives entirely. In fact, Wang Qing found the scenes before him somewhat bizarre. The survivor base in Pingfeng Mountain truly existed, albeit in a dilapidated and eerie state. This meant that the information received by Wang Qing and his companions earlier was flawed. The escape group from Haiqing had not disappeared. So, what was the situation with those reports claiming that the entire escape group had evaporated? Were those people collectively losing their minds? Or had the living beings they were seeing at the survivor base in Pingfeng Mountain ceased to be human? Wang Qing was uncertain. He simply drove along, feeling an unsettling sense of anxiety. Xu Bing also seemed deeply alert to the scene before them, frowning since the beginning. At that moment, Lu Fang had taken a group to the command center in Pingfeng Mountain. They were settled here, but there was a faint stirring of unrest. Zhang Chongtong jumped out of her vehicle and walked directly toward an officer who had led them there, stating, I need to see your experts. I am here on a mission, please cooperate. Zhang Chongtong held a position similar to that of Professor Chun at the research center, which is why He Dong and Lu Fang had been polite throughout the journey. However, here, it seemed she was at a loss. The officer's expression was wooden as he silently regarded Zhang Chongtong. After she finished speaking, he took a long moment before responding, I'm sorry, but we cannot meet your request at this time. The Pingfeng Mountain survivor base is under strict control, as you are from the area. You must stay here for now and are not allowed to go out. Zhang Chongtong's face fell immediately, and she began to protest. Compared to Professor Chen, she had a more assertive personality as an expert scholar. However, with Lu Fang absent, no one was there to support her, and He Dong merely watched silently. Under the rigid cold treatment from the soldiers in Pingfeng Mountain, Zhang Chongtong could only temporarily give up. Wang Qing was also assigned a room, and he quietly asked the soldier guiding them if he knew Zhang Ruizhen, Li Xinqing, and others. The soldier merely glanced at him silently, without saying a word. Their accommodations were still quite good. Not only did each person have their own room, but before mealtime, they were brought Red Bull and bread, which were valuable items in the apocalypse. Actually, this kind of control is not a big deal. If the same situation occurs, a group of outsiders entering the base in Fengtian would also be subject to control, especially since this is a special period, no longer the end of days. Wang Qing can understand this. Among the food, the bread is bulk, and Wang Qing didn't touch it, just picked up a can of energy drink to take a look. In Fengtian, let alone a can of energy drink, even half a can could make a good-looking girl or handsome guy feel ecstatic for an entire night. However, Wang Qing is quite puzzled. After one can of energy drink for a night, who really benefits? Although he has doubts, Zhang Chongtong can't leave, let alone him. With the situation unclear, Wang Qing doesn't want to cause trouble for the military in Haiqing and Fengtian. So he honestly stayed in his room and spent an energy point to upgrade the energy drink to the next level. It became a level 2 energy drink. Like cola, there is no visible change in the packaging. But having learned from the previous experience of upgrading cola, Wang Qing only took a small sip this time. Instantly, a refreshing feeling surged through him. Wang Qing felt a jolt of energy and suddenly stood up, jumping on the spot. With a bang, he couldn't control himself and hit the ceiling, which was over 2 meters high. Now, as a double level 2 awakened, his strength and fire ability have reached level 2, significantly enhancing his physical qualities. He could usually jump like this, but this time was different. He didn't exert force at all, just lightly tapped the ground. And he soared upwards. Through his research, Wang Qing discovered that after upgrading to level 2, the The energy drink's effects were significantly stronger than cola, instantly enhancing various human capabilities for a short time. He felt like a small superhero on land, able to jump freely and run like the wind, with fatigue completely erased. However, Wang Cheng's good mood was quickly interrupted by a knock on the door. With a neutral expression, Xu Bing stood at the door holding a blanket. As Wang Cheng opened the door and was about to say something, she walked into his room with her things without a word. "What are you doing?" Wang Cheng asked. Xu Bing replied, "Just watching you. We're in the same room." Wang Cheng felt again the capability of Yanshan to paint a grand picture. That day, everything he said was about trust, but then he turned around and let Xu Bing keep an eye on him, clearly showing that Deputy Yi still had doubts about him. The atmosphere between the two became somewhat subtle. Xu Bing didn't initiate conversation, but instead did simple physical training in the room, maintaining herself in a combat-ready state. As night fell gradually, Lu Feng still hadn't returned. Strangely, neither lunch nor dinner had been delivered. Through the window of the guest house, Wang Cheng could see a row of armed soldiers standing outside the outer wall, with no change of guard or meal breaks. Wang Cheng kept observing, feeling increasingly strange. It wasn't just him, others were clearly also concerned. Hidong had not gone upstairs but remained in the military vehicle downstairs, silently watching everything outside. Until darkness fell. There were no lights around the guest house, and even the survivor base at Pingfeng Mountain rarely had any illumination. The soldiers on guard outside were completely shrouded in darkness. At that moment, Wang Cheng heard Xu Bing say from behind, "The numbers are off." Wang Cheng turned around, looking at her in confusion. "What do you mean the numbers are off?" "The number of people at Pingfeng Mountain is incorrect." Xu Bing slowly stood up from the corner, gazing out at the darkened Pingfeng Mountain. "I have reviewed the data regarding the military personnel and survivors at the temporary survivor base in Haicheng, and I know the numbers better than you do. Therefore, the numbers are not right. If the information we received earlier is problematic, and the escape team from Haicheng did not encounter any danger and did not truly disappear, then the number of casualties and survivors from that team would increase significantly. By that time, they had already left the urban area of Haicheng, which could lead other survivors to mistakenly believe they had all met with misfortune and vanished. The only explanation for their safe arrival at Pingfeng Mountain is that they encountered no danger on their way out of Haicheng and reached Pingfeng Mountain smoothly, creating a significant gap with those who followed behind. If this is the case, even after experiencing a major collapse, with many people scattered or dead, the team that arrived at Pingfeng Mountain could not possibly consist of so few individuals. Did you notice? The area on Pingfeng Mountain is quite limited, and most of the newly built temporary housing is incomplete and uninhabitable. We could even have one room each here. Something major must have happened. The numbers are far from right." Hearing Xu Bing's words, Wang Cheng felt a surge of alertness. Although he did not grasp the data of survivors and military personnel in Haicheng like Xu Bing did, he remembered the large escape team that had been interrupted by unforeseen events, which had at least tens of thousands following the division headquarters. Just then, while Wang Cheng was deep in thought, a series of gunshots and screams suddenly erupted from the guest house. Chaos ensued immediately. Downstairs, Hidong's voice could be heard shouting, "Be careful!" Wang Cheng and Xu Bing rushed toward the door, but before they could get close, they heard hurried footsteps outside their room. Suddenly, a bloodied figure burst through the door and stumbled inside. Wang Cheng was taken aback upon seeing the person. It was someone he knew, Li Xinqing. He was covered in blood, severely injured, and barely holding on. He collapsed on the floor, staring intensely at Wang Cheng, gasping, "Run, Wang Cheng, run. There are monsters everywhere." Chapter 148. Super Fungus Li Xinqing tumbled in from the front, bloodied and on the brink of death, barely managing to utter those words. Wang Cheng had intended to find him, but he never expected to see him in such a situation at this time. He rushed forward immediately to help Li Xinqing up from the ground, only to notice that something was off with him. Not only was he covered in blood, but there were also large amounts of strange, thread-like substances on his wounds, spreading across his body like spider webs. When Wang Cheng assisted him, his hand became stained with a large patch of this substance. Li Xinqing was gasping for breath, struggling to breathe. On the surface, the Pingfeng Mountain survivor base seemed fine. But where had Li Xinqing come from, and why was he in this state? What did he mean by all monsters? Unfortunately, Wang Cheng didn't have the time or ability to ask these questions. It seemed that Li Xinqing had pushed himself to deliver a message to Wang Cheng. But now he was on the verge of losing consciousness, his eyes rolling back, unable to form coherent words. He was holding on just to pass the message. If Li Xinqing was in such a condition, then Qin Hai, who had been found near the Fengtian survivor base, was already a madman. What about Zhang Ruizhen and the others? What on earth had happened here? Wang Cheng and Xu Bing exchanged glances, both seeing the surprise in each other's eyes. The chaos outside continued, mixed with the sound of gunfire, and now there were chaotic roars echoing, as if real monsters were moving through the darkness. Wang Cheng couldn't afford to be careless. Li Xinxing was an old acquaintance of his, and he knew they were here risking their lives to deliver news. Wang Cheng naturally wouldn't waste this opportunity, relying on his awakened secondary power and the strength of an energy drink. He supported Li Xinxing with one hand and headed straight for the door. Once outside, it was pitch black, with gunfire all around. Xu Bing also drew her gun from her waist, quickly making her way toward the safe passage along the long corridor of the inn. Xu Bing moved forward in a standard tactical posture, holding a gun in one hand and a flashlight in the other, overlapping them as she advanced. Wang Cheng followed closely behind, supporting Li Xinxing. All around them, gunfire and chaotic howls filled the air. The once quiet and peaceful Pingfeng Mountain seemed to have come to life, but this was not the kind of life anyone wanted to see. At that moment, a door to a room diagonally ahead was suddenly pushed open from the inside, and a person stumbled out. When the light shone on them, Wang Cheng and Xu Bing recognized the individual, a soldier from the Awakened team. Although they hadn't interacted during the journey, he was familiar enough to be recognized. Xu Bing stepped forward immediately, wanting to join him and inquire about the situation. The soldier kept his head down as he approached her, but when Xu Bing got closer, he suddenly raised his head. "Watch out," Wang Cheng shouted, throwing out a line of fire. The awakened soldier now appeared entirely different. His face was eerily pale, with numerous thread-like substances growing from his mouth, covering his entire face. One of his eyes was missing, and strangely, there was no blood from the wound. Instead, those same thread-like substances were oozing out, covering half of his face. He was already a dead man. However, it seemed that he was not completely dead, as his palm tightly gripped a handgun, and he knew how to use the darkness to conceal his terrifying appearance. The moment Xu Bing approached, he suddenly raised his gun and fired fiercely. Unfortunately, Wang Cheng reacted even faster. The speed of a secondary awakened individual's abilities was no slower than that of firearms. Wang Cheng unleashed a fiery attack that ignited this bizarre awakened warrior, turning him into a massive torch dancing wildly on the ground, howling and struggling. System prompt. Wang Cheng gained 1 unit of energy points. However, this seemed to be just the beginning. On the floor where Wang Cheng and Xu Bing were located, every room door was suddenly flung open, and nearly all their teammates from the action team had transformed into this strange state, madly rushing towards them. Bang, bang, bang. Xu Bing fired continuously. Coming from a military background, even without using her awakened abilities, her shooting skills were exceptionally precise, and she had no hesitation in shooting at these former comrades. Yet, despite every shot hitting the head, their movements didn't pause, howling and advancing like zombies. Wang Cheng felt a tingle of fear at the back of his head. Just a few hours ago, they were all living people, having come here together from a survivor base, but how had they become like this? Was this a biohazard crisis? Wang Cheng shouted, dragging Li Xinxing back, firing wildly, igniting one fireball after another in the inn, not caring about the potential fire hazard in the chaos. No, this is not a biohazard crisis. They have intelligence. This is a trap. The one who spoke was Zhang Tsungtong. On the next floor down, she was retreating under military protection to a lower level, also being attacked by these monsters. At that moment, they happened to meet, and while she and her research staff were under military protection, her expression appeared particularly calm compared to the panic of others. Amidst the chaos and strength, her gaze held a certain scholarly fervor, and she spoke rapidly. Almost to herself, "I was right. There are no living people left on Pingfeng Mountain. This place has been taken over by a new species. Did you see those filamentous substances on them? That is a type of super fungus I have never seen before. They can grow within the human body, absorbing nutrients from the human form, growing rapidly, replacing bones and flesh, thus achieving control over the human body." My guess was correct. Pingfeng Mountain is the paradise of these super fungi. They possess some form of collective intelligence and have established their own realm here. The survivors and military soldiers we saw today are no longer living people. They are human puppets controlled by these fungi. Her words sent chills down the spines of those around her. Zheng Hailong, caught in the chaotic retreat, shuddered and said, "Are you talking about fungi like the yeast used for making bread and cookies? How is this possible? If the peak has already been taken over by these monsters, then the officers who spoke with us today, guiding us, are surrounded by these creatures. They have retreated to the first floor and joined with others. Soldiers from the military have fired flares, and the bright light illuminates the area around the guest house. Inside and outside the building, shadows sway from all directions. Among them, some are already covered in mycelium, visibly changed, while others, aside from being a bit pale and stiff, look no different from humans. In the courtyard, flames are burning. Several armored vehicles carrying heavy weapons have been destroyed preemptively, smashed in the guest house's yard before they could even start. The officer leading us today stands on a military vehicle not far away, holding a gun, surrounded by a throng of monsters covered in fungi. Yet they do not attack him. His gaze is vacant, but his tone carries a hint of regret. "You should have died without pain." But I hope you can abandon your foolish struggle. Your death is not death. You are merely being replaced by a higher civilization. This is evolution, do you see? In this torrent, the whole world is evolving. We have risen from beneath the earth, while you are merely passers-by on this planet. You are not part of the sequence of revival and evolution. All of you will be eliminated. You should be glad that you can still become a part of us. In the darkness, the shadowy monsters echo in a frenzied response. Faced with this terrifying scene, the faces of everyone present have changed color. If one were to ignore the appearance of these beings and only listen to the sounds in the darkness, they would sound no different from those produced by a human crowd. Gunfire erupts densely in the dark, as these super fungi control human bodies and even manipulate human weapons to fire wildly. They possess intelligence. A chill runs through Wang Cheng. He has never seen such monsters in Haicheng. Where did they come from? Is the transformation of the fleeing group in Haicheng all related to them? As the apocalypse breaks out, everyone is drawn to the massive, twisted, and mutated monsters rampaging everywhere, without considering that even a worm or an ant can expand and mutate hundreds or thousands of times. The mutations in the microscopic world are also happening, just as rapidly and wildly, yet they are the easiest to overlook. However, no matter how fast the evolution occurs, how could they possibly develop advanced intelligence so quickly? Even to the point of mimicking human behavior? The words of the infected officer left Wang Cheng feeling somewhat confused or horrified. What he referred to as revival. Fungi and viruses have existed on Earth far longer than humans, and can be said to share the same lifespan as the planet itself, making them the true masters of Earth. Is there a possibility that in ancient times, they once had a civilization akin to that of human beings? Only to gradually fade from the historical stage, much like the dinosaurs, due to changes in the Earth's environment? In the past, Wang Cheng had read a scientific report that proposed a crazy hypothesis. Given the brain size of dinosaurs, they likely possessed extremely high intelligence and may have even given rise to civilizations comparable to humans. This global evolution brought a chance for the revival of these microbial civilizations. The Earth has existed for 6 billion years, while humans have only been around for a few million years, and the recorded history of human civilization is hardly significant. In the long history of the Earth, humans are just a drop in the ocean. Although human technology advances rapidly and can even reach outer space, to this day, humanity has not unearthed all the secrets buried beneath the Earth's surface. What happened in ancient times? Does a mysterious hollow center of the Earth exist? Did Earth once share a gaze with Mars, giving rise to incredible other species? These questions remain a huge mystery. As Wang Cheng delved deeper into his thoughts, he felt increasingly cold. He recalled that the strange beings also possessed intelligence, and the biological technology they had used was certainly not a product of modern human civilization. He had a feeling as if the ground beneath him pulsed like the skin of some creature, a cry from ancient civilizations that had rotted but not completely perished. Buried deep below, it's the bread. Those who ate the bread have turned into monsters. They put fungal seeds in our bread. Damn it, why are only you researchers safe? Nearby, Wang Guanghua suddenly screamed, interrupting Wang Cheng's thoughts. It was as if he had suddenly realized something, pointing at Zhang Tsongtong and others, saying, "Did you already know what was going on here? You didn't warn us. You want to use us for experiments." Chapter 149. Whose life is more important? At this moment, the inn was completely surrounded. In response to Wang Guanghua's distorted accusations, Zhang Tsongtong's expression remained unchanged. "I don't know. Initially, this was just our speculation about the situation at the Pingfeng Mountain survivor base. It was a possibility I brought up to the leaders, and I came to verify this personally. To obtain answers, necessary sacrifices and experimental tests are unavoidable. As long as we understand what they are and collect samples and sufficient data, we can fight against them, and the survivor base can survive. But this is unbelievable. How can such tiny fungi give rise to this level of intelligence, even mimicking human behavior and communicating with the survivor base in such a short time?" Zhang Tsongtong's face was filled with academic fervor. However, her words seemed to indirectly acknowledge Wang Guanghua's question. At this moment, the military soldiers and awakened warriors surrounding her all turned to look at her, and a hint of coldness and terror emerged in each of their eyes. Wang Guanghua stared at her in shock, his expression one of despair. "Why do this? Why not tell us? You crazy woman, I'll kill you." Zheng Hailong and the soldiers on either side acted urgently, restraining the out-of-control Wang Guanghua. Although the actions of Zhang Tsongtong's team sent chills down their spines, from another perspective, her behavior was understandable. Sacrificing these few individuals to uncover what had happened on Pingfeng Mountain would undoubtedly allow the survivors base in Fengtian to prepare in advance, preventing it from becoming the next Pingfeng Mountain survivors base. At this moment, they could not let Zhang Tsongtong and the others die. They were the ones studying these matters, and their survival was meaningful. A hint of fear flashed in Wang Cheng's eyes. If it weren't for the caution he had developed through his survival training, he might have also just eaten the bread. Moreover, His thoughts differed from Wang Guanghua's fear. He realized that he had indeed come to the right place. These terrifying mutated fungi had developed self-awareness and intelligence, and they could spread simply by relying on a piece of bread, which was utterly horrifying. If this threat was not detected early and alarms were not raised, and if they began to invade the survivors' base in Fengtian, the danger they posed would far exceed that of the countless monsters outside the base. These barely noticeable fungi would spread to every corner of the Fengtian survivors' base along with food like biscuits and bread. By the time he reacted, his parents, Su Xinghai, Zhang Chao, and even himself might already be infested with these terrifying super fungi. What did the officer mean just now? Were they the beneficiaries of a global evolutionary apocalypse? Or were they truly ancient beings? Just then, a loud explosion sounded nearby. A rocket hit the officer standing on high ground, and amidst the flames, the officer who had just been rallying the troops was instantly blown apart. He Dong suppressed the smoke rising from the rocket launcher and said, "This madwoman cannot die. Protect her. We must bring the news back to Fengtian." Wang Qing also steadied his mind. Now was not the time for deep thoughts. The urgent task was to escape as quickly as possible. Around them, those terrifying humans controlled by the super fungi were advancing with stiff movements. They looked like zombies, but their running speed was anything but slow, and they possessed intelligence, even able to use human weapons to fire in a dense barrage. Not far away, a tank approached, its cannon and armor covered in creeping mycelium. The heavy turret slowly moved and fired a deafening shot, blowing open the wall of the inn in front of them. They surged forward, howling. It was clear that the previous groups sent by the survivors' base in Fengtian had also transformed into these super fungi-infected beings. Indeed, they were intelligent. Before taking action, they had already destroyed several armored vehicles and infantry fighting vehicles of the Fengtian action team. The current focus of their assault was also on the few remaining armored vehicles and infantry fighting vehicles, aiming to destroy these heavily armed and armored units first. This meant that Wang Qing's team effectively lost half their strength. Their mobility and firepower would be significantly reduced. He Dong slung the rocket launcher behind him and grabbed the machine gun with one hand, firing wildly ahead. At the same time, his palm faced forward as streams of condensed water arrows erupted from his hand, shooting out in a frenzy. Behind him, the military soldiers and awakened warriors followed closely. The awakened warriors appeared somewhat disorganized. They were unable to understand Zhang Tsongtong's actions and were reluctant to protect the researchers. Wang Guanghua was particularly agitated. If it weren't for Zheng Hailong and others holding him back, he might have tried to kill Zhang Tsongtong amidst the chaos. The military soldiers, however, remained rational. They understood their mission clearly. Since Lu Fang had not returned, they needed to complete their task of protecting Zhang Tsongtong as she boarded the military vehicle in the yard. The scene was exceptionally terrifying. Those controlled by the super fungi had no vital points in the conventional sense. Even shots to the head or heart only knocked them down momentarily before they quickly got back up, howling and charging forward. At this moment, the lights on Pingfeng Mountain went dark, yet the terrifying howls and rustling sounds echoed throughout the area, as if the entire mountain had come to life. Rushing towards the small inn, He Dong displayed incredible bravery, charging at the front and carving out a bloody path. Wang Chung speculated that He Dong was at least a level 7 Awakened One, a peak powerhouse in the current classification system for level 2 Awakened individuals. Wang Chung and Xu Bing closely followed the large crowd, boarding their vehicle and setting off with a roar, smashing through the chaos. Fortunately, while these super fungi exhibited intelligence, they seemed to lack a complete understanding of human weaponry. A tank had arrived, firing from its rotating turret, but its accuracy was abysmal, mostly missing its targets. The only shot that hit was a vehicle, which immediately exploded into a massive fireball. Wang Chen got into his small truck, starting it up immediately. He entrusted Li Xinchao to Xu Bing in the back and followed closely behind He Dong's vehicle, crushing through the crowd to escape the inn. However, chaos erupted behind their convoy. Many awakened ones and other survivors recruited for the operation were left behind. He Dong's vehicle had already surged ahead, but their vehicles had yet to start, and many hadn't even boarded. The convoy experienced a brief delay. The military soldiers in front hesitated, unsure whether to turn back to assist. Just then, Zhang Tsongtong pulled out an approval document from her pocket and said, "This is an order issued by the command center. If Lu Fang is absent or in trouble, I am the primary responsible person for the entire team. I now command an immediate breakout. Accelerate. We must kill our way out. Forget about the others. I order you to protect my team and me at all costs. We are crucial to combating these monsters. Everyone else can die, but we cannot." Faced with Zhang Tsongtong's command, the soldiers were momentarily stunned, as it meant sacrificing the lives of those left behind. However, the situation was urgent, and military orders were paramount, leaving little room for contemplation. The soldiers quickly took action, abandoning those who hadn't boarded and the awakened warriors. Closely following the lead vehicle of He Dong, charging forward and crushing the monsters in their path. Under the swaying lights of the vehicle, they could see the stiff bodies surrounding them. Some were covered in fungi, while others appeared no different from ordinary people. They filled the roads and wilderness like a dark tide surging in the shadows. Behind them, the abandoned individuals and awakened warriors cried out in despair, "Wait for us. Please wait. I have family in Fengtian. I can't die here. You are the real monsters. Why is your life more important than ours? Why?" A similar scene had occurred in Wang Cheng's memory, reminiscent of an event in Haicheng. At that time, meteorites had fallen, and the mutated crimson-potted plants had erupted, severing the entire fleeing group, with the command unit ahead also having left in such a hasty manner. In the apocalypse, whose life is more important? The answer seemed clear to anyone. Experts and scholars who could bring new technologies and research how to combat mutated creatures were obviously more important than ordinary people or even average awakened warriors and military personnel. But when such a situation happens to oneself, becoming the unimportant one among those prioritized, who could remain rational? Even if one could think clearly, how many could stand by and watch themselves be abandoned and face death? In such circumstances, even if Wang Cheng switched to battleship mode, given the scale and current level of his battleship, he could not save these people. The cruelty of the apocalypse was playing out at every moment. Amid the chaos, Wang Cheng shifted his gaze and sped forward. Chapter 150. We don't need to run anymore. Bullets swept in from the side, darting past the small truck-shaped battleship. Amid the heavy impacts, Wang Cheng's vehicle did not shake at all, and the main body of the battleship showed no signs of damage as it continued to speed ahead. At that moment, their convoy had shrunk by more than half compared to when they had arrived. The armored vehicles they had come in were mostly destroyed before the official firefight began, leaving only ordinary military off-road vehicles, significantly reducing their firepower. In terms of personnel, there had also been heavy casualties, with only military soldiers and a few members of the awakened warrior team remaining, along with Zhang Tsongtong and other personnel from the research center. Zhang Tsongtong and the researchers were closely protected in the center. In this operation, the only remaining members without a formal structure were Wang Cheng and Xu Bing. However, with Wang Cheng's truck-shaped battleship present, they could still keep up with the team. Even in such an environment, Zhang Tsongtong is indeed a formidable person. She has dealt with her compatriots and is not an ordinary individual herself. At this moment, she even climbs out of the military vehicle to record and photograph with a strange instrument, seemingly wanting to document the situation of these surrounding creatures. Wang Cheng believes that Zhang Tsongtong's orders and choices are reasonable from a rational perspective, but from an emotional standpoint, he finds it hard to have any goodwill towards the expert from the research center. Nevertheless, he actively guards the vehicle of Zhang Tsongtong and the other experts. As he understands the importance of this group, Wang Cheng is piloting the warship and could leave Pingfeng Mountain at any time. But his warship has limited capacity and cannot carry Zhang Tsongtong's entire team along with their equipment and data. In such a situation, even if Wang Cheng leaves, it would be of no use to return to the survivor base at Yinshan and the command center at Pingfeng Mountain. At best, it would allow them to prepare in advance. However, it would be much more meaningful for Zhang Tsongtong's team to return with the data and materials, as they could start their research early and even find targeted solutions. Therefore, Wang Cheng does not switch the warship's form to fly away directly, but instead protects Zhang Tsongtong and the other experts while searching for an escape route. Hidong clearly thinks the same way. His vehicle leads the way, charging through a mass of terrifying super fungi, trying to find a way down the mountain, but has yet to succeed. The roads below have been completely sealed off by these creatures, and the forest is no different. They had not entered the forest behind the mountain earlier, but now, as they approach in the darkness, they discover that the withered forest is filled with spiderweb-like fungi. In the densest areas, these fungi have formed structures resembling walls, and there are also giant mutated creatures covered in mutated fungi lurking in the dark forest, ready to spring forth as they draw near. These creatures possess intelligence. As they move down the mountain, they encounter traps everywhere. In the darkness, the headlights flicker, and gunfire shakes the air. The entire Pingfeng Mountain seems to have become a desperate dead zone, filled with swaying, ghostly beings with no way to escape. Soldiers of the army, ordinary human survivors, and even mutated monsters are indistinguishable in the face of these mutated fungi. They are all manipulated puppets. It seems they have some unique way of transmitting information, rushing in from all directions, howling as they chase. In the darkness, their cries echo everywhere. Kill them. Make them part of us. Stop. This will be a glorious evolution. You will become the cornerstone of our civilization. The answers to the strange occurrences on Pingfeng Mountain have been revealed. Why there was no need for lights, why there were no walls, and why there were no monsters attacking. It turns out that this mountain is no longer truly occupied by humans. Any creature daring to attack here has already become part of the true horror of the fungal kingdom. Hidong, known for his bravery and self-reliance, initially intended to lead the team down the mountain forcefully to break through and return to the command center. However, the armored vehicles in their convoy that could have been used to clear a path have all been destroyed, and they are severely lacking in firepower and armor. Now they are left with only conventional military vehicles. Facing a dense swarm of monsters, charging forward is tantamount to seeking death, as they find themselves trapped in the ambush set by these creatures, unable to break through the road. With no way to force a breakthrough, Hidong, who was leading the way ahead, changed direction and charged toward the summit of Pingfeng Mountain. This move greatly surprised the mutated fungi, which primarily blocked the downhill routes. While the uphill routes had relatively fewer defenders, the convoy led by Wang Chung was able to surge ahead. The convoy signal was severely disrupted. Hidong's strategic intention was straightforward. Since descending was impossible, he would go uphill, hold the advantageous position, and wait for rescue from the designated area. The top of Pingfeng Mountain was relatively flat and not steep, with a scenic area located right at the summit. They accelerated upward, temporarily leaving the mutated fungi behind. However, everyone knew this was just temporary, as the howling from the surrounding forest never ceased. It was easy to imagine that the crazed mutated fungi monsters were sprinting madly behind them, and if they dared to stop for even a moment, they would be surrounded once again. Zhang Songtong and Hidong in the front did not dare to slow down as they pressed upward, wanting to create a larger distance and seize the opportunity to reach the summit first, to build a defensive line against the pursuing monsters. However, at that moment, a military soldier whispered to Zhang Songtong, "It seems we've lost another vehicle." Zhang Songtong looked up and saw that the conspicuous black cargo truck in their convoy had suddenly fallen behind. But she only glanced at it. In her mind, her team and the research materials they possessed were the most important things here. Others, even the life of Hidong, a top awakened one, were not as important to her. Therefore, she only needed to ensure the safety of her team and their materials. Zhang Songtong said, "Forget about them. The people in that truck are not important at all. You must protect us with all your might. Contact Hidong ahead immediately. What does he really want? Can we truly hold the mountain? If we can't find a solution before these mutated super fungi infiltrate the survivor base, the entire area could collapse and turn into a nest for these monsters." Hidong, upon receiving Zhang Songtong's inquiry, felt the muscles on his stern face twitch slightly and said, "I want to know if we can hold it too. Is there any other choice now? Damn it. Tell her to be honest and not to keep jumping around. I know she is important, but whether she and her team can develop a cure to help humanity resist these super fungi infections is still uncertain. If her reckless actions lead to my downfall, I'll be the first to go after her. As for that cargo truck, it probably ran out of fuel. There's no need to worry about them. The two people in that truck seem to be from Haicheng heading to the designated area, so they might even be insiders for these monsters." Hidong was not from the military. He had made his way through the survivors to where he was today, not only because of his extraordinary awakened strength, but also because he was a tough character. He has a broad perspective and understands the significance of individuals like Zhang Songtong. Otherwise, given his personality, he would never have been able to protect them. However, as he said, his broad perspective is predicated on his own safety. If the crisis threatens his life, he wouldn't care about the bigger picture. Anyone blocking his path would be in danger. Meanwhile, Wang Chung was rapidly slowing down and swerving into another lane. Xu Bing was taken aback as she watched Wang Chung leave the convoy. "Wang Chung, that's not the right direction. What are you doing? Are you planning to run away?" I know Zhang Songtong can be a bit self-centered, but her actions are not selfish. Just overly confident at most. "You think I'm running away?" Wang Chung said helplessly, as he manually switched the operational mode of the ship's cargo truck. "Don't worry. I'm not running away. To be honest, I don't like that female professor, but I know she's making the right choice. What I truly dread is returning to my hometown and finding my parents infested with these fungi. That's a consequence I cannot bear, so I want to run. In fact, we shouldn't have to run at all." "What does that mean?" Xu Bing was puzzled. Wang Chung had already slowed down and stopped on the side of the road. There, he spotted an overturned large truck that was barely visible in the dark. It seemed to have flipped during the outbreak, and the driver was nowhere to be seen, but the cargo was scattered everywhere. Among the debris were a bunch of large-wheeled cannon cars typically used in resorts. The dark cannon muzzles pointed towards the sky, and many fireworks were also scattered around. Wang Chung jumped out of the vehicle, listening to the terrifying howls of monsters in the surrounding darkness, and quickly began moving the items onto his ship. Conventional weapons like missiles and laser cannons were not very effective against these super fungi, as even if their heads were blown off or bodies destroyed, they could still move under fungal control. The best way to deal with them was undoubtedly through fire attacks. However, Wang Chung lacked powerful fire weapons. Just then, seeing those cannon cars sparked a wild idea in Wang Cheng's mind. Why not upgrade one of the cannon cars into a high-tech flamethrower to blast the super fungi? At that point, whether anyone would run away would be anyone's guess. Chapter 151. All fear comes from insufficient firepower. With his evolved strength, Wang Chung effortlessly lifted the heavy cannon car onto the ship's cargo truck. He quickly gathered many more cannons from the ground. Before the outbreak, it was clear that the Pinfeng Mountain Resort was preparing for some event and had brought in a large number of cannons and fireworks. Unfortunately, the event never started before the outbreak, and the truck transporting the cannons was left abandoned on the road, which Wang Chung now salvaged. Despite Wang Cheng's rapid pace, strange mutated creatures were already chasing after him. A figure resembling a human officer was crawling with super fungi all over its body. Its walking posture was unnatural, twisting its limbs awkwardly as it rushed forward at high speed, staring intently in this direction. Its running style resembled that of a monster, yet it spoke in an extremely calm tone, presenting a terrifying contrast of two completely different states within one person. Don't run. You cannot escape. Everyone here has become a part of us. You should too. Our planet needs a truly great civilization to lead. Other civilizations should merge with us. Only then can we overcome the challenges of endless ages. History has proven that our civilization has thrived for far longer than anyone else and is still full of vitality. You should all submit to our civilization. Wang Chung was ready to raise his hand and incinerate this person. However, these words sent chills down his spine. He slightly suppressed the flames in his palm and provocatively said, "You claim to be a civilization? You are merely lucky products of global evolution. Even if your fungi have existed on Earth for a long time, what does that have to do with your current state? What kind of civilization is that?" The officer suddenly halted, staring blankly at Wang Chung, then erupted into a deranged laugh as if he had heard a joke. He clearly wasn't laughing in a normal way. His body twitched as if he were having a seizure. "Ha ha ha, do you know what you're saying? We are a newly born civilization? No, we have existed long before you even knew where you were. This is a revival. We are reviving. We have returned to our world. You humans have no idea what has happened on this planet. You are just a bunch of infants crying in their cradles, oblivious to the impending doom, foolishly believing that everything is still under control." Wang Chung, Shu Bing shouted ahead. More mutated fungal creatures were surging from all directions, emerging from the surrounding forest and the road ahead. One individual was even crouching on the ground, aiming a rocket launcher. Wang Cheng's expression was complicated. He felt that what these super fungal beings said might indeed be true. The words spoken in their deranged state had a certain logic. Their confidence in their civilization and disdain for humanity was not casual. Wang Chung had encountered bizarre creatures before, and in his view, those beings, as intelligent beings, resembled newborns. However, the feeling he got from these super fungal beings was completely different. But now was not the time for further discussion. A fiery streak shot from Wang Cheng's palm, igniting the officer, and he abruptly shut the truck's door. In the form of a level 4 warship, the truck had a small window between the rear compartment and the front driver's cabin. Wang Cheng directly opened the small window and said to Shu Bing, "I've given you the authority. You drive and meet up with Hidong and the others. Don't worry, by the time we regroup, I will have a way to sweep these monsters away." As Wang Chung paused slightly, he said, "Also, my vehicle is very durable. Feel free to crash it." Upon hearing this, Shu Bing was taken aback for a moment. After securing Li Xinxing in the back, she quickly stretched her long legs and jumped into the driver's seat. The moment her hand touched the steering wheel, she was surprised. The screen in front of the truck driver's seat displayed a line of text. "Vehicle mode driving rights have been temporarily transferred. Transfer time set to 15 minutes. Please be reminded that your warship belongs to Captain Wang Chung, and if you engage in any violations, the captain has the right to terminate your driving privileges at any time." Immediately, the sides of the steering wheel lit up softly, as if identifying her fingerprints and palm patterns, before dimming again. Finally, the message appeared. "Welcome, Shu Bing." Shu Bing gasped. She knew Wang Cheng's vehicle was extraordinary, but she didn't expect it to be to this extent. However, in the face of danger, she had no time to think further or investigate. She quickly slammed the steering wheel in the opposite direction, causing the vehicle to crash backward wildly, crushing the unfortunate officer who had just been ignited by Wang Chung beneath its wheels. In front of them, under the illumination of the truck's headlights, were terrifying super fungal infected beings, writhing and stumbling chaotically, rushing towards them like mad. Shu Bing snorted coldly and forcefully turned the vehicle on the mountain road. The massive truck, under her control, maneuvered nimbly and fiercely, relying on the tank-like defense of Wang Cheng's warship to carve out a bloody path as they sped forward. Once she got the hang of it, Shu Bing felt more and more that Wang Cheng's vehicle was no ordinary one. Not only was the overall hardness astonishing, but the built-in auxiliary systems were also exaggerated. The starting speed far exceeded that of normal vehicles of the same type. On the control panel inside the vehicle, there were many strange buttons, and to her surprise, she even saw 2 radar displays disguised as dashboards. If she hadn't been in the driver's seat, it would have been impossible to notice anything unusual from other positions. Who exactly is Wang Chung? Although Shu Bing had some understanding of him, She still couldn't suppress the immense doubts in her heart at this moment. However, as a qualified warrior, she knew very well what needed to be done at any given time. Her judgment, like Wang Cheng's, was clear. They couldn't let Zhang Zongtong and the others die here. They had to bring them back to the base in Fengtian. Only then could this trip be justified. In the future, when these super-fungal creatures infiltrated the Fengtian survivor base, they could rely on Zhang Zongtong and the others' technology to prevent disasters. Thus, Xu Bing suppressed her chaotic thoughts and raced forward, smashing through the obstacles in her path, directly charging up to the mountaintop. Thanks to the formidable performance of Wang Cheng's truck, they managed to create a distance from the mutated monsters chasing behind them. Ahead, the outline of the top building of the resort began to emerge. The architecture was antique, located at the highest point of Pingfeng Mountain, housing the resort's restaurant and high-end accommodation area, a place usually unaffordable for people like Wang Cheng and Xu Bing. He Dong and others had already arrived, busily setting up defenses using everything they could find around them to prepare for the impending assault of the monsters from the entire Pingfeng Mountain. Some soldiers from the military had even climbed onto the roof to set up antennas, trying to contact the survivor base in the region for reinforcements. They were startled to see Wang Cheng's vehicle wobbling towards them, almost ready to open fire, until they realized that Xu Bing inside the vehicle was not infected, and they breathed a sigh of relief. He Dong commented, "Are they trying to run away but found no way out and came back? Never mind them. Let us focus on our preparations." In He Dong's eyes, even though Wang Cheng and Xu Bing were both secondary awakeners, they were nothing special, as He Dong himself possessed remarkable strength. To him, these two were just ordinary members of the team, and he preferred to focus on setting up defenses rather than wasting time on them, especially since the terrifying sounds of the monster horde could already be heard. However, the next scene greatly surprised everyone, including He Dong and Zhang Chengtong. Xu Bing parked the vehicle, and Wang Cheng jumped out from the back, holding an exaggeratedly designed wheeled cannon. The cannon had a somewhat retro look, reminiscent of those from the wartime period, featuring 2 wheels and a single barrel. However, upon closer inspection, it was evident that the structure of the cannon was tight and complete, and the materials used were quite sophisticated. Most importantly, there were numerous devices connected at the bottom, indicating that it was far from simple. This was the black technology flame-throwing heavy artillery that Wang Cheng had upgraded from a wheeled ceremonial cannon. He had spent 600 energy points to upgrade it from a first-level ceremonial cannon to a second-level artillery piece, making a significant investment. By this time, the monster horde had already come into view. Wang Cheng had no time to waste. In fact, not many people were paying attention to him. Wang Cheng didn't need anyone to notice what he was doing. Weighing several tons, the cannon was easy for him to lift with his secondary awakened strength. He quickly carried it to the highest point of the resort buildings, surprising the 2 small soldiers setting up antennas there. "What are you doing up here?" they exclaimed. "Below." He Dong also shouted, "What are you doing? What is that? Don't delay our communication with the region. Without reinforcements, we're like a river without a source." He Dong thought Wang Cheng was causing trouble. Wang Cheng replied, "I need a high position to cover half the mountain with my firepower." He directly set up the heavy artillery at the mountain top, then pulled out a box of ceremonial shells he was carrying in the other hand, manually upgrading and loading them with high-explosive incendiary white phosphor shells, stuffing them into the cannon one by one, and then aimed directly at the ground below. With a thunderous roar, the heavy projectile shot out of the barrel, instantly hitting a nearby spot. The high-explosive incendiary white phosphorus shell exploded with a bang, illuminating the dark mountain top in a dazzling crimson glow. The second-level artillery had a caliber of 210 millimeters, making it one of the heaviest weapons on this battlefield. The battle was far from over. Standing atop the mountain, the firepower covered half of the peak, unleashing a relentless barrage. The ground shook violently beneath, flames engulfed the withered forest, and those controlled by the super fungi, both humans and monsters, screamed madly in the inferno. A tank, also under the control of the super fungi, came rumbling up the slope, swerving dangerously. The commander quickly upgraded and loaded an armor-piercing round. The 210 millimeters heavy artillery shell shot out in an instant, piercing through the battlefield and striking the tank, which erupted into flames, transforming into a massive torch atop the mountain. The commander, firmly positioned on the summit, fired furiously. His secondary heavy artillery was simple to operate, with a rapid firing rate far exceeding similar weapons from other nations, allowing for a frenzied barrage akin to that seen in video games. With sufficient ammunition at hand, he single-handedly established fire superiority over the entire peak, pushing back the hordes of super fungi monsters under his relentless firepower. All fear stemmed from a lack of firepower. Once it was unleashed, who would dare to flee? "I'll blast you all to pieces." The blazing flames enveloped half the mountain, and his energy levels soared. Below, several individuals, including He Dong, Zhang Songtong, Wang Guanghua, and Zheng Hailong, were left dumbfounded, staring in disbelief at the scene before them. Chapter 152, Holding the Summit. The dark sky was illuminated by the fire. The commander stood on the rooftop, and as far as the eye could see, half the mountain was engulfed in flames. The high-tech flamethrower artillery didn't actually turn into a flame-throwing gun. It launched white phosphorus shells. While effective at close range, for widespread strikes at this distance, the combination of artillery and shells proved far more effective. In this mountainous area, despite the severe desiccation of vegetation, the impact of the white phosphorus shells was astonishing, especially against these fungal creatures, where flames had devastating effects. The horde of super fungi monsters that had surged forward was pushed back in droves. Unfamiliar with modern human equipment, they struggled to counterattack effectively, relying mostly on their physical forms. Even the tanks, forced into action, found it hard to hit anything from a distance, becoming easy targets for the commander, who held the summit and began to push back, attempting to extinguish the flames. As the fire raged, the fate of those atop the mountain was uncertain, but it was clear that the fungal monsters would be the first to suffer. Hence, they were quite eager to put out the flames. Meanwhile, from his elevated position, the commander gradually ceased fire. Not only because the artillery shells were nearly depleted, but also because his upgraded heavy cannon had overheated, the barrel glowing red hot. Placing an egg on it would fry it instantly. Maintaining such a high firing rate for this long was already quite extraordinary. In order to achieve such durability and caliber, Wang Cheng upgraded this equipment from level 2 to level 3, striving for stability and sufficient specifications. After all, Wang Cheng had plenty of energy points. The two young communication soldiers beside him, who had just been questioning him, were now left speechless in shock. Where did you get so much ammunition and artillery? They had come to Pingfeng Mountain with a decent-sized convoy, but they hadn't brought any heavy weapons since it was a covert investigation, and having too many weapons wouldn't look good. They certainly didn't have artillery with a caliber of 200 millimeters. Where did this come from? Not to mention all this weaponry and ammunition. The same question crossed Hidong and the others' minds, and everyone was looking at Wang Cheng. Wang Cheng had already anticipated this. He just smiled slightly and pointed to his small truck, saying, "What do you think is loaded on my vehicle?" Deputy Yi had already assigned me a mission. He directly used Yi Anshan as a shield. The others exchanged glances. Hidong looked at Wang Cheng, leaving the heavy artillery behind, jumping down with a strange expression. He hadn't expected that this person he had just looked down upon would turn the tide of battle and push back those monsters. However, everyone's surprise ended there. They only sighed at Deputy Yi's clever planning and shifted their focus back to the task at hand. According to Wang Cheng's current explanation, he was merely a soldier. The real power undoubtedly lay with Deputy Yi, who had secretly supplied him with heavy weaponry and that artillery. Without these, even though Wang Cheng was a level 2 awakened being with some strength, he was nothing extraordinary. Only Shu Bing jumped down from Wang Cheng's vehicle, looking at him with a complex expression. Only she knew that the heavy artillery that Wang Cheng fired was not given to him by Yi Anshan. It was an ordinary ceremonial cannon that Wang Cheng had just picked up by the roadside, just a moment ago, in the short time since arriving here. That ordinary ceremonial cannon had been transformed by Wang Cheng into a heavy artillery piece sweeping across Pingfeng Mountain, bombarding half the mountain and forcing the super-mutated fungal creatures to retreat wildly. How did he achieve this? With flames soaring and monsters retreating, the area briefly became safe. Hidong organized the personnel to set up a defensive line on the spot and urged the communication soldiers to intensify contact with the base in another location. However, it seemed that some kind of shielding device had been activated on Pingfeng Mountain, making it difficult for them to send information and unable to establish contact with the survivors' base to request rescue. Hidong could only say, "Let us try again. It's okay. Even if we can't reach the command center, they have been monitoring the situation in Pingfeng Mountain and have likely sensed that something is wrong here. With such a commotion, the command center will surely be aware and will take a series of actions." The creature below fell briefly silent, and the surroundings gradually felt safer. Hidong blocked Zhang Tsungtong and asked the question everyone was concerned about. "Professor Zhang, please tell us what is going on here. Share everything you know. There is no need to hide anything now. The more we combat personnel understand, the better it will be for everyone's safety." Many gazes turned toward them. Wang Cheng, who was calculating his energy points, also looked over, recalling the unsettling words he had just heard from the officer infected by the supermutated fungi. Feeling a mix of shock and confusion, Zhang Tsungtong glanced at everyone, exhaling lightly. As a researcher, she appeared more composed than those from the awakened team like Wang Guanghua. She took 2 steps back and sat on the hood of a nearby SUV, crossing her legs and revealing her long legs and attractive figure. "Some things are confidential, and I can't disclose them," she said. Wang Guanghua immediately became agitated upon hearing this. "We were almost killed because of you. What does confidentiality matter now? Should we keep secrets even if all of humanity is wiped out?" His mental fortitude clearly wasn't strong in this perilous situation. His emotions were already on the brink of collapse. However, Hidong merely turned his head and shot him a cold glance. Wang Guanghua shrank back like a cat whose tail had been stepped on, falling silent. It seemed that those from the awakened team were quite intimidated by Hidong. Zhang Songtong pulled out a pack of cigarettes from her pocket and lit one. In that moment, she looked less like a scientific expert in an apocalypse and more like a ruthless survivor leader. She said calmly, "It's meaningless for me to share those things with you. It would only increase panic. I can only say that these super fungi are currently difficult to transmit through direct contact. They can only spread through food. Before coming here, we had obtained some infected biological samples from the Pingfeng Mountain and Haiqing areas, but those organisms were not human. We suspect there may be similar infections on Pingfeng Mountain. But to be honest, my team and I had also hypothesized that there might be infected individuals here. These super fungi might possess intelligence. But we didn't expect that this place had already been overrun and evolved to this extent. You can rest assured about these fungi, theoretically. There is no risk of infection from normal interactions or combat. They can control large organisms and have intelligence, but as you can see, they are not familiar with the world of larger beings since they exist in the microscopic realm. Even if they are intelligent, it would be difficult for them to truly learn and understand our weapons to turn them against us in a short period. However, their infiltration methods are insidious. I know many of you are dissatisfied with my actions, but my team and I will not apologize for this. We are doing the right thing. The sacrifices made now are for the safety of hundreds of thousands of survivors in the future. If they want to infiltrate us, they can do so thoroughly. We must make them expose themselves in advance, study them, and find ways to prevent their infection and effectively eliminate them within the body. Perhaps you are not aware that fungi are not viruses or bacteria. The existing drugs we know of have no effect on this type of fungus. My team and I do not have confidence in developing a specific antidote. In other words, if they start to invade the survivor base in Fengtian, no one can resist them. The only solution is to eliminate all infected individuals. Our approach is more radical because these mutated fungi are far more dangerous than you can imagine. Zhang Songtong's words were not very pleasant. It was a forced explanation, and not many in the team could understand. Wang Cheng barely grasped it. He was a science student and had a good grasp of high school biology. He understood what Zhang Songtong meant. Without an antidote, once infected, the only option is to kill the infected. Given the characteristics of these microorganisms, if they begin to infect Fengtian at a microscopic level, without an antidote, there may not even be a need for war. Fengtian could quietly and completely fall. Wang Cheng thought for a moment and prepared to bring Li Xinqing down from the vehicle. Li Xinqing was severely injured and had fungi growing within him. The medical bay inside the battleship could treat his external injuries, but there was no way to address the systemic fungal infection. For now, the only option was to seek Zhang Songtong's team to see if there was any way to save Li Xinqing's life. Li Xinqing must know something. If he could survive, he would definitely bring back more important information. But at that moment, Shubing, with her icy demeanor, stood next to Wang Cheng and suddenly said, "This doesn't explain where the others went. Even if infected, why are you and I not infected? Only those who went to Pingfeng Mountain got infected?" Wang Cheng paused slightly, glanced at the others, and whispered, "What do you mean? The super mutated fungal infection likely occurred after they arrived at Pingfeng Mountain, rather than while they were in Haiqing. Otherwise, in this state of infection, if it had appeared at the temporary survivor base in Haiqing, given my status at that time, I should have been aware of it. But I had never heard of it. The expert team in Haiqing had never discovered such organisms. You can also recall that we had never seen infected individuals in Haiqing, right? On the way to Fengtian, you didn't see any either, did you?" Shubing's voice paused slightly, and she continued, "What I mean is that the fleeing group that left Haiqing and broke away from us must have encountered something. Only this can explain why so many subsequent fleeing survivors, both you and I believed, have disappeared, and why so few reached Pingfeng Mountain." Chapter 153. Zhang Songtong's judgment. Shubing's words sent a chill through Wang Cheng's heart because he realized that what she said made sense. The terrifying infection on Pingfeng Mountain does not explain the fact that countless survivors believe the evacuation team from Haiqing simply vanished on that fateful day. What exactly did they encounter? Haiqing and Pingfeng Mountain seemed to be shrouded in a colossal shadow, and even Wang Cheng, standing here, inexplicably feels a sense of unease creeping up his back. With the emergence of a super fungus and a bizarrely distorted reality, Wang Cheng senses that this Earth, this world he once felt familiar with, is becoming incredibly alien. Danger lurks in the unseen shadows, poised to surface and swallow him whole at any moment. The terrifying part is that he doesn't even know what it is. Wang Cheng instinctively recalls what the infected officer had said. "You humans have no idea what is happening on this planet. You are just a group of infants who can only cry in their cradles, foolishly believing that everything is still under control, even as disaster approaches. Disaster is imminent. The apocalypse has already begun, a global crisis is sweeping through, and the calamity is already here. Why is he still using the term approaching? Wang Cheng feels a sense of unease. This trip to Pingfeng Mountain has made him realize that he is right to be here. Otherwise, he would never have known these things and would still be living in a self-deceived tranquility. The world is undergoing drastic changes, and he needs to understand what is happening to this planet and then grow immensely powerful. Even if that infected officer was not exaggerating. Humans are like infants in the face of the current upheaval, unaware of the dangers surrounding them. He must mature into an adult ahead of time, relying on warships and systems to crush all potential threats on this planet. After the recent massacre, Wang Cheng's energy points surged, surpassing 5,000, and upgrading to a level 5 warship is within reach. However, he doesn't rush. Instead, he heads towards his warship to bring Li Xinqing down and hand him over to Zhang Songtong's team, hoping they can save him. Li Xinqing's life hangs by a thread, and human lives are at stake. Upgrading the warship can wait a moment longer. Energy points 1T just disappear. But if he delays any longer, Li Xinqing may not hold on, and then it will be too late. Wang Cheng and he are old acquaintances. Li Xinqing came to warn him, and now seeing him in this state makes Wang Cheng uneasy. He hopes to pull him back from the brink of death. Moreover, Wang Cheng has a feeling that Li Xinqing and Qin Hai must have encountered something or know something. If he can bring Li Xinqing back from the gates of death, perhaps he can learn some answers from him. Wang Cheng pulls Li Xinqing out from behind, startling everyone present. He Dong steps back repeatedly. Li Xinqing not only has severe injuries, but also has a significant amount of fungus growing on him, with dense white fungal mycelium sprawling all over, resembling the monsters outside. He Dong coldly asks, "What are you doing?" The burly awakened one swiftly draws his gun, clearly startled by the super-mutated fungus that has been running rampant throughout the night. Seeing it now, he perceives danger and wants to shoot immediately. Wang Cheng remains silent, only glancing at Zhang Songtong, briefly mentioning Li Xinqing's situation. Zhang Songtong's eyes indeed lit up. Unlike the fear seen in others, there was a hint of curiosity in her gaze. "You say you know him, and he warned you to run? Quickly, bring him to the back. I need to examine him. He might be in a state of infection without having his brain completely taken over. And this intermediate state could be significant for our research on resisting this mutated fungal invasion. I'll see who dares to touch him." Zhang Songtong's gaze swept across the crowd. He Dong's facial muscles twitched slightly as he slowly put his gun away. Zhang Songtong then took Wang Cheng and Li Xinqing, along with several researchers and their equipment, swiftly entering the building of the nearby resort. They found a spot, pushed some tables together to form a bed, and laid Li Xinqing down. Outside, He Dong's eyes were fixed on these people, his expression unfriendly. At that moment, Wang Guanghua cautiously approached from behind, saying, "Dong Ge." He Dong turned his gaze toward him. Wang Guanghua whispered, "Those experts don't regard our lives as important, Dong Ge. We're all part of the Awakener combat team, and I barely count as someone who eats with you. If something goes wrong, you can't leave us behind." He Dong turned around, his massive frame looming over Wang Guanghua, casting a shadow that almost enveloped the hunched figure of Wang Guanghua. His gaze was somewhat cold. "If you have something to say, just say it." Wang Guanghua felt a shiver of fear at He Dong's presence, stammering, "What I mean is, protecting these experts is fine, but we need to find another way out. If something goes wrong, only a few will be able to escape. I hope, Dong Ge, that you can take me with you. I will definitely serve you loyally from now on." He Dong glanced at the position down the mountain, where, behind the flames, a crowd of infected individuals was gathering, mobilizing more weapons and equipment to first extinguish the fire and then attack the mountain. "We are all trapped here. I can't possibly escape. So how can I take you with me? Focus on your task, protect the experts, and reinforce the defenses." He Dong's voice was cold. Wang Guanghua gritted his teeth and said softly, "Those who can run, Dong Ge." That Wang Cheng has strong connections. His modified vehicle, approved by Deputy Commander Yi, has enough firepower. If used well, it can clear a path. I have fought alongside Wang Cheng before, and I saw that modified truck. It was comparable to a small armored vehicle. During the defense of the Fengtian survivor base, I witnessed Wang Cheng use that truck to charge through a horde of monsters. Dong Ge, with your strength, if you can get those two things, you won't have to worry about breaking out. He Dong was slightly taken aback by this. He hadn't thought about it in that way. Instinctively, he glanced at Wang Cheng's truck parked not far away. Xu Bing was leaning against the vehicle, eyes closed. Unexplainably, other thoughts began to arise in his mind. Who wouldn't want to survive? He Dong felt the same way. He does not possess the same level of awareness as military personnel when it comes to protecting experts. This perspective comes from a broader viewpoint, and it is also because the current situation has not deteriorated to that extent. However, if it truly reaches that point, even if the experts are more valuable, He Dong would find it difficult to sacrifice his life just to protect them. If there is a way to break through the encirclement, and if that vehicle is indeed as comparable to a small armored vehicle as Wang Guanghua mentioned, combined with the 200mm heavy artillery as a pathfinder, it might be possible to fight all the way down the mountain. As for others, they would be of no concern. Although that small truck can carry a lot, it wouldn't fit many people if it also had to accommodate the 200mm cannon. A glimmer of cold light flashed in Hidong's eyes. All right, I understand. Don't worry, if it really comes to that, I won't forget you. A smile immediately appeared on Wang Guanghua's face. His thoughts were simple. As long as he could survive, he didn't care about the future of any experts or anything else. He didn't even share Hidong's sense of the bigger picture, harboring extreme hatred for Zhang Chongtong, and with his own disdain for Wang Cheng. He had only come to ally with Hidong in hopes of seizing the truck and the heavy artillery from Wang Cheng and escaping. As for Zhang Chongtong and Wang Cheng, they could just wait to die on this Pingfeng mountain. Meanwhile, Zhang Chongtong had already checked on Li Xinqing's condition. Li Xinqing's state had deteriorated further since he first appeared before Wang Cheng. His breathing had weakened, and while his wounds had not healed, they eerily no longer bled, but were instead being drawn up by fine mycelium. Zhang Chongtong and her team had been circling around Li Xinqing, observing the mycelium structure under a microscope and emitting faint gasps of astonishment. She did not show excessive emotion when facing the monster, but appeared quite excited during the research. After waiting for a moment, Wang Cheng could no longer hold back and asked, "How is it? Can you control his condition?" Fortunately, he hasn't been completely infected. His presence will help us understand the complete process of this super-mutated fungus infecting organisms. I can try several drugs to test their suppressive effects on this infection. Perhaps because Wang Cheng had brought Li Xinqing, Zhang Chongtong's attitude towards him was noticeably better than towards others. At this moment, she instructed a researcher to take out an unknown drug from a backpack and directly inject it into Li Xinqing. Wang Cheng silently observed this scene. Indeed, Zhang Chongtong and her team were well prepared and had even brought testing drugs with them. It seemed that Yan Shan was also somewhat aware of the situation here. That Deputy Yi really did have a way with words, but still withheld key information from him. Wang Cheng could understand that as a senior official, one must consider multiple layers, and it was unlikely for someone he met for the first time to be completely open-hearted. However, he couldn't help but feel a bit uncomfortable. Nonetheless, Wang Cheng understood that without Deputy Ye's invitation, it would have been difficult for him to appear here, let alone make a decisive resolution. Wang Cheng was somewhat worried, unsure if Su Ling had gone to see Yan Shan. At this moment, he came to his senses and looked at Zhang Tsongtong, asking a question that had puzzled him throughout the journey. "Professor Zhang, on my way here, I encountered an infected individual who told me that they were not a product of global mutation, but rather a revival of an ancient civilization. Are they just boasting or?" Upon hearing this, Zhang Tsongtong paused slightly in her actions, raised her head, and glanced at Wang Cheng. After a moment of thought, she replied, "I know you. You are someone from Professor Chen. You studied at university in Haicheng and escaped to the survivor base in Fengtian after the apocalypse." She handed a fungal sample she had just taken from Li Xinqing's neck to her assistant and walked towards Wang Cheng, wearing glasses that enhanced her intellectual beauty. She said, "I must remind you, no matter what you hear, do not speak to others about it. As for your question, to be honest, I don't know either. If these are newly emerged intelligent beings, they should be like children learning to speak. Just like humans, it took countless years to evolve to understand the world. However, our research has found that while they are microscopic fungal organisms, their biological patterns and survival abilities far exceed those of humans. Individual fungal units do not possess intelligence. But when thousands come together, they form a kind of neural network. Even if there are thousands of them, they seem insignificant to us. In other words, if they encounter danger, they can break apart and survive in the microscopic world unseen by the human eye. When needed, they can also come together again. From this perspective, they have the capability to survive for countless years, which also explains why they possess such intelligence right from their emergence. Perhaps we can only find answers by capturing one of their organisms. This world is becoming strange for both of us. Although I am a scholar, I do not know much more than you." Chapter 154. Hidong's threat. Zhang Tsongtong's information was merely her speculation. Yet, her words cast a shadow over Wang Cheng's heart. They still needed to monitor Li Xinqing's situation, and since Wang Cheng could not be of any help here, he directly left. He stood silently in the corridor of the resort building for a while, before quietly walking outside. By this time, the area around the resort had gradually quieted down, and below the mountain, the flames were dimming. Countless shadowy figures could be seen moving on the other side of the flames, preparing for the next round of attack. They would not give up. They had to take down the humans at the top of the mountain. The communication soldier on the roof was still trying to contact the survivor base in Fengtian. But those mutated fungal infected individuals seemed to have learned how to activate the jamming devices, making it impossible for them to communicate with the outside world. As Wang Cheng stepped out, Hidong's gaze fell upon him. Wang Cheng glanced at him, but did not think much of it, and headed straight for his warship. He just crazily bombarded Pingfeng Mountain. Although he consumed quite a few energy points, the energy points he gained were even more substantial. At this moment, The total energy points in the Royal City have exceeded 5,000, allowing for the upgrade of the current level 4 battleship to level 5. The Royal City has been waiting for this moment for a long time. Now is the time. A level 5 battleship might have a way to directly take most people here away. Time is pressing. The next round of counterattacks from the mutated fungi could come at any moment. The Royal City went directly to his battleship, exchanged a few words with Shubbing, provided a brief explanation, and boarded the vehicle himself. He drove the small cargo truck straight into the enclosed warehouse of the resort behind. The warehouse was spacious, serving as a garage for resort vehicles and supplies. The truck fit perfectly inside, leaving plenty of space. The Royal City directly pulled down the rolling shutter door from the inside, sealing off the entire warehouse. He would complete the upgrade of the level 5 battleship here. Naturally, the upgrade needed to avoid the people outside. The outside matters had already been entrusted to Shubbing. She had witnessed the Royal City's upgrade once before. Although she still didn't fully understand how he did it, she had a rough idea of what he was about to do. She stood outside the warehouse, leaning against the wall with her arms crossed, remaining silent. She was guarding the Royal City's upgrade. Although she was sent by Yi Anshan to keep an eye on the Royal City, Shubbing had her own thoughts. She knew when to act appropriately. Observing this scene, Wang Guanghua and He Dong stood up from the corner. They had no idea what the Royal City was planning. Watching him drive the small truck into the warehouse, they both changed expressions. He Dong remained silent, while Wang Guanghua said, "What do you mean by this? Everyone's vehicles are outside building a defense line. Why does he get to drive his vehicle in? Is he unwilling to contribute?" He moved closer, pointing at the closed rolling door of the warehouse and shouting. Unfortunately, Shubbing was not easy to deal with. Facing Wang Guanghua, she merely raised her eyelids to glance at him and said coolly, "Are you questioning me? Do you have the right to question me?" Shubbing's character, needless to say, was that of a fierce and powerful woman. Otherwise, she wouldn't have been entangled with the Royal City and been taken along by him. That one glance and retort made Wang Guanghua shrink back, taking 2 steps back and not daring to speak anymore. On the other side, He Dong witnessed this scene. He glared at Wang Guanghua and slowly stood up. He had believed Wang Guanghua's words and had his own plans, considering the Royal City's truck and the heavy artillery on the roof as his means of escape. Now, seeing the Royal City hide the truck, he naturally felt doubtful. He had intended to let Wang Guanghua take the lead, but did not expect Wang Guanghua to be so useless, being reprimanded by Shubbing with just 2 sentences. Thus, He Dong slowly stood up, took a step forward, and approached Shubbing, frowning as he said, "Shubbing, I remember your name is Shubbing, right? I know you were treated like a treasure at the temporary survivor base in Haicheng and are an awakened expert with a military rank, but I must remind you, that was all in the past. At the survivor base in Fengtian, you are nothing, and he has no right to question you, just as you have no right to question him. Now, I ask you, what is Wangqing doing? Is hiding now a sign of cowardice?" He Dong is tall and strong. Although Xu Bing is also quite tall, she remains slender as a woman. He Dong's physique alone is equivalent to 2.5 Xu Bing's. Standing before her, he exudes an invisible pressure, with an arm thicker than Xu Bing's thigh, carrying an authority that doesn't require anger to command respect. He is the leader of the awakened team for this operation, and what he says holds weight. He Dong is also someone who is aware of his own status. While he has his own agenda, he does not intend to expose it blatantly. He is applying pressure on Xu Bing. Xu Bing, however, remains unfazed, looking up at the towering He Dong and calmly saying, "He is finding a way. Although my relationship with him isn't great, I know that since he has come, he won't act as a coward. Captain He, rather than chasing after Wang Chung relentlessly, it would be better to conserve our strength. I believe it won't be long before they launch another attack." The firelight on the mountain is gradually dimming, and the terrifying howls of the infected are echoing from below, indicating they might attack again at any moment. He Dong's face suddenly lost its luster, but at this point, he could not express his anger. He leaned slightly closer to Xu Bing and said, "I know what vice leader Yi assigned you to do, which is to keep an eye on Wang Chung. It seems your friendship has led you to violate the orders you received. I will report this to Vice Leader Yi honestly after I return. Also, you better not act as cowards, otherwise, I will twist your heads off your bodies. Trust me, even though we are all second-level awakeners, there is still a gap in our strength." Xu Bing did not respond, merely watching him silently. He Dong then said nothing further and turned to leave. People tend to project their own thoughts onto others. He Dong, secretly calculating his own escape, saw Wang Chung and Xu Bing's unusual behavior and naturally assumed they might have similar plans to preserve their strength and flee if the situation changed. He was also calculating how to get Wang Cheng's vehicle, and he could not allow such a situation to arise. However, this was fine. If they truly intended to run, killing them would be considered a justified execution of deserters, not an act of seizing their possessions. A cold smile crept onto He Dong's lips. Xu Bing silently watched his retreating figure, remaining quiet. She is different from He Dong, Wang Guanghua, and even Wang Chung. She is not a survivor but comes from the military. In her eyes, the mission and national interests take precedence, and her judgments are based solely on that. She believes Wang Chung poses a threat, and regardless of whether it is Vice Leader Ye's order, she will keep her eyes on Wang Chung. Right now, she believes Wang Chung has the capability to turn this situation around and protect the safety of expert Zhang Chongtong's team. She will spare no effort to safeguard Wang Chung's security and ensure that no one disturbs him. This is her principle of action. The king in the warehouse was unaware of the events happening outside. He was tirelessly initiating the upgrade of the level 5 warship. The super-mutated fungal infectors below could launch an attack at any moment. They possessed intelligence and had just suffered significant